Welcome to the Mississippi AI Regulation Task Force, and welcome to your capital. If this is your first visit, we hope that you will take some time to walk around and explore this beautiful building. I've been told by many visitors that it is within their top 5 in the United States. I am Representative Jill Ford, and Senator Bart Williams, which co-chairs this task force with me, sends his regrets for not being able to be here today, but has been chosen to attend an energy summit in Washington State. It was very difficult for him to accept that invitation on such short notice, but I assured him I would do my best and asked Dr. Colin Napier with the Mississippi Artificial Intelligence Network to act in his stead. A couple of items we need to address before we get started. First and foremost, much appreciation to Lonnie Egger with the peer committee for securing the speakers, Ms. Terry Hammett assisting with the logistics, and Benjamin Eubanks for handling all the IT from recording live stream and for our panelists on Zoom. Welcome to all the attendees, panelists, and the task force that are on Zoom. I know that Dr. Julie Jordan with Mississippi State is a part of our task force, and she is on Zoom this afternoon. We will conclude each panel approximately 5 minutes early to allow the next panel to get settled. When panelists are switching out, feel free to take a break, but we will not have formal breaks due to time constraints. Please silence your phones and please keep discussions respectful. I think I've been so nervous about people being disrespectful. Over the next 2 days, our goal is to listen and to learn, to gather facts. This is an emotional issue, but I fully expect we can discuss this in a respectful manner. If you are disruptive, you will be escorted out by security. Artificial intelligence and data centers present enormous opportunities for Mississippi, but they also raise important questions about infrastructure, energy, water, workforce, and environmental stewardship. We work to bring everyone to the table today, from the companies building these facilities to the agencies that regulate them, to our utility providers, local elected officials, economic developers, and citizens who have concerns. So we can hear every perspective before making recommendations. I want to express my sincere appreciation to each of you. Thoughtful public policy is strengthened when people are willing to participate. So thank you for being here. We will get started by asking the task force to introduce themselves, and it looks like we have a quorum. So will you start with it, Mr. Austin?
Yes, ma'am. Gregory Austin, Deputy Director of Policy for Mississippi Attorney General Win Fitch.
Jim Brinson, Intern Director for the Mississippi Office of Homeland Security.
Brigadier General Jamie Hankins, Mississippi National Guard, Director of the Joint Staff.
Colin Napier, Director of the Mississippi Artificial Intelligence Network.
I'm Jill Ford, Representative in the Mississippi House of Representatives. Gerard Gibbert, which is one of our ex officio members, is on his way. Will be here in just a minute. Aaron McKinney from Amazon Web Services will be here in just a minute, and then go ahead.
Dr. Craig Orgeron, Executive Director of Mississippi Department of Technology Services.
Great. It looks like we have a quorum today. We need to first start. We need a motion and a second to adopt the minutes from the January's meeting. Perfect. Thank you. The first speaker that we have, I just want to say thank you so much, Ms. Samsa. We invited 10 different groups to be here today, and you were the one that took this serious enough to show up in person. We also have virtually Mr. Jim Walsh, so we want to welcome him to our meeting. And we will start. We will ask you to present your opening remarks. Introduce yourself, your organization. After you have both given your opening remarks, I will invite the task force to present their questions. Please speak into the microphone. You will need to push the button and a green light will appear. This is being recorded, so we want to make sure that we can hear your comments.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Samsa. I'm from South Haven and I'm the Executive Director of Safe and Sound Coalition. You'll have to excuse if I lose my voice during this. I'm recovering from a cold. So I'm also a physician assistant, a medical clinician. I will admit I was a little surprised to be invited to speak today just after looking at the list of task force members and not seeing any public health experts or environmental scientists represented. I also couldn't help but notice that I was listed on today's agenda as opposition, but I'm not entirely sure what it is that I'm supposed to be opposed to. I'm not necessarily opposed to artificial intelligence or even to data centers. So I decided to make a list of what I am opposed to. First, I'm opposed to rush projects that prioritize the timeline and profits of a private out-of-state company over the people who actually live here. Second, I'm opposed to anything that harms my community and my family, just as I hope anyone in this room would be. According to a health impact study conducted by Harvard-trained public health professionals at Empower Analytics Group, the pollution from XAI's 41 planned permanent turbines is projected to impose $30 to $44 million in annual health costs on surrounding communities through premature deaths, increased hospitalizations, and lost productivity, including missed work and school days. And that estimate is likely very conservative. It evaluates only one pollutant, which is long-term annual average PM 2.5. If you don't know what that is, it's fine particulate matter. It's when you inhale it, the particles are so small, 2.5 microns, that they make their way into your bloodstream and can cause inflammation and a wide variety of issues. That study also only considers the 41 planned permanent turbines, not the 59 turbines that are already operating on site as we speak. It also relied on emission estimates prepared by XAI's own consultants, estimates that contained multiple methodological flaws. That estimate also does not account for the health effects of the relentless noise pollution that residents in my community have endured for nearly a year now. An independent noise analysis concluded that the measured sound levels and characteristics, quote, would easily affect sleep and be a source of stress, hypertension, anxiety, and disorientation. Third, I'm opposed to a project approved without a regular vote of the Board of Aldermen, or for that matter, before the public even knows they exist. XAI was not mentioned in any city or county agenda or meeting minutes until after the project had already been approved. So we were denied any meaningful opportunity to raise concerns before decisions were made. Fourth, I'm opposed to projects that operate 59 gas turbines without a permit for a single one of them in an area that is already failing national air quality standards and sits within 2 miles of 10 different schools, one of which is an elementary school that is less than a mile away. Hundreds of residents showed up to the MDEQ public hearing for XAI's PSD permit, and not a single person spoke in favor of approving it. The MDEQ permit board, none of whom were present for that public hearing in South Haven, received the 1,600-page permit record, which included those public hearing comments, on a Saturday, just 3 days before they made their decision. They went into executive session and deliberated behind closed doors, and then they came back out and unanimously approved that permit. Fifth, I'm opposed to projects that consume massive quantities of water from our pristine aquifer, including 7.77 million gallons in just 12 days, despite my community being assured that they would use no water at all because they would be using a closed loop system, and despite a promised gray water recycling plant that is yet to come to fruition. Sixth, I'm opposed to projects that disrupt the lives of countless nearby residents, preventing them from enjoying their own backyards or even sleeping through the night because of nonstop noise 24 hours a day for nearly a year now, despite repeated assurances that noise would not be an issue. There have been numerous occasions where I myself can hear the turbines from inside my home, and I live almost 2 miles away from the site. Residents have now resorted to filing a class action lawsuit because no one is listening to us. Seventh, I'm opposed to projects that treat community engagement as an obstacle instead of a responsibility. To quote Brent Mayo, the former XAI Vice President of Operations for Colossus, quote, "In South Haven, we're not publicly disclosing what's happening there." Eighth, I'm opposed to projects that expect the public to accept assurances in place of transparency. Ninth, I'm opposed to financial incentives without meaningful conditions. If taxpayers are going to subsidize private companies' data centers, then those companies should meet the highest standards for transparency, environmental stewardship, and community engagement. According to a memorandum of understanding that we obtained through a public records request, which is, to be honest, where most of our information has come from, XAI has a 30-year fee in lieu agreement that allows them to pay only 1/3 of the property taxes they would otherwise owe. For some reason, there's also no sewage fee listed on their water bills, but we've found no documentation explaining why or who approved that incentive. And finally, I am opposed to projects that force ordinary citizens like myself to spend their own time, money, and energy trying to protect their communities because frankly, the people entrusted to do that job don't seem to be doing it. Emails to Governor Reeves, our senators, our representatives, our county supervisors, and our aldermen all go unanswered. Dozens of residents have been blocked on Facebook by our own mayor simply for asking questions. The city of South Haven is seemingly no longer willing to let residents be added to the citizens' agenda if their topic pertains to XAI. And because I expect many of the other speakers on the agenda will focus on the benefits of data centers, I'd also like to discuss a few of the claims that you're likely to hear, as well as some of the context behind those claims that you may not. You'll probably hear about all the jobs XAI brought to South Haven. What you might not hear is that there is still no publicly available count of how many of those jobs went to local residents. Based on what we've observed, including the large number of out-of-state license plates at the site and conversations we've had with people who work there, it seems to us that the majority of workers have come from outside of Mississippi, usually for temporary positions. You also might not hear about the 200+ GXO employees who lost their jobs after XAI bought the warehouse for their data center, or even about how Southwork Metal Manufacturing, located in the same industrial park as XAI's power plant, is now inexplicably relocating to Hernando. And when our vice director, who's sitting out there, brought that concern up to MDA director Bill Cork on Twitter, he was immediately blocked. You'll probably hear about XAI's investment in widening State Line Road and resurfacing Two Lane Road. What you might not hear is that those projects address problems caused by XAI's own traffic. You also probably won't hear that the city of South Haven used its emergency fund to pay for a traffic signal at Two Lane and State Line after traffic at the intersection increased dramatically. You'll probably hear about the $1.4 million donation that XAI made to the South Haven Police Department. What you might not hear is that for months, 1 or 2 patrol cars could regularly be seen parked along the road leading to the power plant without any public explanation for their presence. You also may not hear that South Haven officers spent months directing traffic at Two Lane and State Line until emergency funds were used to install that traffic signal. You might hear that XAI was a former power plant owned by Duke Energy and had already been zoned industrial. What you may not hear is that Duke Energy plant had been inactive for 23 years. It operated for less than a year in total on a much smaller scale with different turbines than what's there now, and that the nearby neighborhoods were there long before that property was annexed and zoned industrial. I have lived in Mississippi my entire life. Until now, I never wanted to leave this state, but today I can't honestly say this is a state where I feel comfortable starting my family or practicing medicine. I hope after everything I've just said, you can understand why. Because this isn't about being for or against AI. It never was. It's about whether the people of Mississippi deserve transparency, accountability, and leaders who will protect the health and well-being of our families and communities before the interests of a private corporation. Thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Let's hold the questions up until we hear from Mr. Walsh. Mr. Walsh? Oh, hold on just a minute. We can't hear you.
Sorry, treasure those moments. I was on mute. Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Walsh. I'm the policy director at Food and Water Watch. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and spend a lot of time thinking about how we can protect our food and water resources. And data centers are something that we're very concerned with moving forward. And I want to actually start with a point of agreement. And I think that is that artificial intelligence is significantly consequential. It's already shaping government services, education, healthcare, business operations, and national security. And the question before Mississippi and frankly the rest of the country is not whether AI matters. It clearly does. The question is whether the physical infrastructure being proposed to support AI will be governed in a way that protects the public, or will it be governed in a way that protects the interest of the tech industry? And I want to impress upon you all that AI data centers are different from the office parks, the warehouses, and various industrial projects that state and local governments are used to evaluating. Their footprint can look, relatively small on a map, but their demands for electricity, water, land, roads, transmission, and backup power can be enormous. And right now, data center development is moving ahead faster than regulators and policymakers, and the public can really understand the impacts. And once these projects are permitted and operating, reversing the adverse impacts can be difficult or even impossible to achieve. And so this really warrants a very cautious approach. And I'm glad to see the task force members coming together today to actually take in and understand these considerations and concerns. Mississippi isn't the most high profile data center state in the country, but it's clearly a place that is at the center of this debate. We've seen Amazon announce plans for a $25 billion Mississippi data center investment, and that will stretch across several Mississippi counties and impact several Mississippi counties. And the project's backers are emphasizing jobs and capital investment and grid upgrades. And we should examine those concerns. The task force should look at those concerns. Regulators should look at those concerns. But they're not the whole story. And it's very important that you all look at the rest of the story too. Because before Mississippi commits public resources and ratepayer dollars and water resources and all the infrastructure that's required for this build out, you should really know what costs communities are being asked to absorb. And it's a lot more than what the industry talks about. The first issue I want to address is electricity. Now, nationally, the Department of Energy and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory estimates that data centers used about 4.4% of US electricity in 2023. And by 2028, that could jump to 12%. And EPRI projects that data centers could reach 9 to 7% of overall consumption by 2030. That's not normal growth. That's not normal economic development that we're used to. It's not normal request for that much energy. It's a major planning challenge for utilities and regulators, and one that we're already seeing do a tremendous amount to increase cost on ratepayers across the country. Now, in Mississippi, the competing claims are out there about the energy and how much people will save. I saw that Entergy and Amazon say that the large energy users are going to spend $300 million in grid improvements and produce long-term customer savings. Synapse recently put out reporting that shows that residential ratepayers will go up by $10 per month. Now, there's conflicting information out there, but the big question is, well, who pays if the industry's projections are wrong? Existing households and small businesses should not be used as a backstop for these private infrastructure bets that big tech is making. And some projects, while they may actually increase cost, they may have a litany of other impacts on communities as well. And so one of the things we're hearing the industry talk about in terms of what they're going to do to keep costs down is they're going to bring their own power. And we're going to bring our own power plants, and you don't have to worry about anything. Well, the reality is that bring your own power projects can still increase cost on ratepayers, even if a data center is building their own power plant. And that's because the components that are necessary for these power plants and the fuel that's necessary for these power plants in the scale we're talking about increasing the build out will shrink the supply of available components and fuel that other power plants can use to run this infrastructure. And so that, even in of itself, with these bring your own power projects, can actually still increase the cost on consumers for their energy usage. Another issue is reliability. They need a tremendous amount of uptime, and when they're large enough, they will bring their own backup generation. And this backup generation can cause a litany of other problems for communities. The air pollution that comes from diesel generators can be significant. The noise pollution that comes from these projects can be significant. And so I think there's real questions that Mississippi should be asking, not just about the source of the power and what those impacts are going to be, but also what about the backup generation that's going to be used? In some places, we've seen backup generation be the actual power source for the actual data center. And that's what they're relying on to run these projects 24/7, which causes a lot different impacts on a community than what was initially planned for. Another issue is water, and this is one that I think everyone across the country should be concerned about. We're facing record droughts across the country, and Mississippi, is a relatively water-rich state in some ways, but also water risks are very local, and that's something I want to highlight for the committee. Is and I think all of us around the country saw that the Jackson water crisis showed that and infrastructure failures are significant, and that residents can be left paying the price for years of underinvestment and poor planning. And some data center facilities are discussing using recycled water. Those are major infrastructure projects which cost a lot of money. And it's really important to recognize that this is a technology, but it doesn't actually speak to the impacts that the water usage of a facility will have on the public. So the public doesn't need to just know the type of technology that's going to be used, because these water recycling facilities aren't a silver bullet, but they also need to know how will it be used and what are the actual impacts. What is the source, volume, and seasonal impact and discharge plans for water resources? Not just the technologies are going to be used to make things more efficient, but does that mean that because these efficiencies are being used, all of a sudden the water issues go away? In many instances, no, they're just a way that companies seek to greenwash themselves. It's also important to look beyond the actual technology that's being proposed, because these water recycling technologies are also very water intensive. And they're water intensive because they require significant amounts of energy. And that energy source can be a significant driver of water resources. And so it's important that we look at all of these things, not in a vacuum of one individual technology being used, but also at the broader impacts. So what are the cumulative impacts and what are the total impacts of these projects? Another issue I want to talk about is pollution and community impacts. As I mentioned before, data centers in many instances will rely on diesel for backup generation. Residents near the Canton project have already raised concerns about dust and noise and traffic as it pertains to air quality. Diesel generators will only make those things worse. And these are, things that careful planning can do, but also when you put a major industrial facility near homes without strong standards and transparency and permitting and meaningful community impact, you can wind up with really dirty, polluting facilities literally in people's backyards. It's also important to recognize that the water technologies that the companies are using can also contain harmful contaminants. We've seen that for the water recycling and the circular cooling systems, the companies will actually use chemicals to add into those systems, and those chemicals will be used to stop corrosion, they'll be used to stop bacterial growth and scaling. Those contaminants can be PFAS, which are persistent toxic chemicals that are harmful to human health, and they don't stay in the system forever. Those systems need to be flushed out and cleaned, and those contaminants can find their way into local water supplies. And so there's a significant risk of water and air pollution that can come from these projects that needs to be evaluated and actually assessed and understood before projects are actually put forward, and put rules in place to actually protect the public from those impacts. And the other thing I want to talk about is workforce and rural development. Now, construction jobs from data centers can be significant, but these capital intensive projects are not generally very labor intensive. Amazon's projected about 2,000 jobs across Mississippi data center operations, but you should look at that against the scale of public incentives, like how much money is being invested in these sorts of projects. What's the energy demand and cost on communities? What are the infrastructure commitments that we need to make? And we shouldn't be asking rural communities to trade away water pollution and air quality, local control, potentially millions and billions of dollars in tax dollars for what might be a very modest and moderate increase in construction jobs over a very short period of time. And so what should Mississippi do? My recommendation is to put a pause on approvals of large scale hyperscale data centers until the state adopts clear standards. And this isn't an anti-tech position. It isn't an anti-AI position. It is one that actually says that this technology is moving forward faster than regulators have been able to keep up. And we need to make sure that the public is protected before running headstrong into something that could cause irreversible impacts on our communities. And so, your task force is charged with balancing innovation and the public interest and mitigating the risks of unintended consequences. And that's a great framework to think about this from. But we need to set the rules in place before that build out becomes too large to govern, because once they're built, you really lose a lot of leverage to protect the public in that place. And Mississippi can do a lot to learn from communities across the country that haven't done this well, and to do it better, to do careful planning, to say yes to transparency, yes to protecting households and small businesses, yes to responsible water stewardship, yes to technology that serves the public. But to do that, you can't rush headstrong into this. And a temporary moratorium on large scale, hyperscale AI data centers is a protective standard and not anti-innovation. It's a responsible government's position to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you, Ms. Samsa. We'll turn it over now to the task force members for any questions they have prepared. Dr. Orgeron?
Dr. Neighbor. I think one of the questions I have is there's no doubt that artificial intelligence as a technology is a game changer with respect to this. But I think it's worth noting that there have been data centers around for a very long time. And I think maybe a question, hopefully a thoughtful question would be, in areas like Virginia or Ohio, what have those communities done to ensure that this is done the right way? Because certainly in the state, this is new for sure. And there's no doubt that from November of 2022, with the release of ChatGPT, that it's been in a bolt of several years in terms of the impacts of AI to all aspects of our lives. But in places, thank you, in places like Virginia or Ohio, are there best practices that are out there? These corridors that have had large scale data centers, do best practices exist on the other side?
So I think one thing I want to highlight here is that, yes, we have had data centers for a long time, right? Verizon has them to connect our cell phone data and information, right? And, various telecom companies. What is being built out now is significantly different and significantly greater than any of those facilities, right? We're talking, massive gigawatts of energy to run these facilities, right? We're talking about terawatts of power across the country being put forward for this, and tremendous amounts of water that we haven't seen before. And so what communities are doing that I think are making responsible decisions is we've seen hundreds of communities across the country actually put forward moratoriums on data centers in order to actually look at the specific issues that impact their communities, right? And so you need to make sure, like looking at these things, looking at cumulative impacts of data centers. What is not just this one data center, but what about the 9 other data centers that are being proposed in there that might also be pulling out of the same aquifer, that might also be pulling out of the same grid on those same hot days during the summer that could lead to brownouts or blackouts and grid congestion? These are the sorts of things that we should be looking at, that communities that are doing it well, I think, are actually asking these questions about cumulative impacts, not just asking about the technology that's going to be used, but also really looking at what are the ways that we can make sure that our water resources aren't strained. Because once you start allocating water out to various companies for things, it's hard to get it back. and thinking not just about how things are now, but projecting into the future. And what sort of economic decisions communities and states might want to make. Because if you dedicate significant resources to these data centers to use your water and use your energy, you may not have it for other economic development down the road. And so I think these are really the important things. And we're seeing communities actually put these moratoriums in place. In Maine and New York, the legislatures in those states have actually passed moratoriums on data centers. And we are in a situation where I think that the more we ask questions, the more challenges we find. And so I think that, the policy recommend that I would recommend was to actually drill down, take the time to drill down on what Mississippi's actual issues are with water. Take the resources to, get resources from the federal government, use state resources to actually study these projects and make sure you understand the broader impacts of them. Make sure there's transparency. That's something that communities have been fighting against in general, is the lack of transparency in these projects. One thing that we've seen happen is that companies will sign non-disclosure agreements that make it very difficult for the public to actually get information about how much companies are paying for water, or how much water they'll be using, or what they're paying for energy, or how much energy they'll be using. And those sorts of things can make it very difficult to do long-term planning. And so we would support a prohibition on the use of non-disclosure agreements for these projects, because they are so consequential that the public has to have full openness and disclosure on what's being put forward. And if an industry wants to claim, well, we can't do this because we don't want the public to know this because it's proprietary secrets, then I think there's real questions you need to ask about to what extent do we really want to have these projects if we can't have real public scrutiny about the impacts that these projects are going to have on communities.
Are you familiar with the AWS project in Madison County, Mississippi?
I'm aware of its existence. I've read some press reports on it. But I'm in DC studying all these things from a 10,000-foot view. So I'm sure you're probably much greater of an expert on that specific project than I am.
Just with respect to water, you do realize that the two AWS campuses will utilize gray wastewater, not potable water, estimated to be about 200 million gallons per year. The state of Mississippi consumes approximately 1 trillion gallons of water per year. We account for about 0.73% of total water consumption in the United States, which is estimated to be 120 trillion gallons. Are you familiar with the Nissan plant that manufactures vehicles directly across the street from the Canton AWS campus?
One thing I would caution.
It consumes more water than the AWS facility will.
One thing I would caution members of the panel about in terms of evaluating this, and also other elected officials, is not looking at national and state figures for usage. Water decisions are, in terms of like aquifers and surface water, are not, it doesn't matter how much is used nationally, right? You can have adverse impacts on aquifers and water impacts based on whatever those things are. And so those are sorts of things that should be looked at. I also caution the looking at these sorts of projects of like, well, what is the impact of this gray water potentially being on the larger water system itself? And just because it's using gray water doesn't mean that it doesn't have impacts on the watershed. And so I think these are important because the facilities themselves were probably using evaporative cooling. So even if you're using gray water, the evaporative cooling systems will lose water to the atmosphere. And that can create significant challenges and problems for recharging a watershed because of those sorts of concerns. So I think that I would just caution the committee to looking at kind of very narrow scopes of review of what's being proposed with a given technology, or and think about things in terms of the body of area that's actually being impacted, and think about what this will mean on it. Just because a Nissan facility is using more water than another facility doesn't mean that that facility is sustainable and should be going forward. But it does mean that that water usage could impact, that water usage could have an impact, and that water usage, and maybe it's totally fine, right? I mean, these are the sorts of things. I didn't say that using that water is bad, right? And I didn't like, but you should look at these things comprehensively and cumulatively, and not just looking at a narrow technology, and not just looking at these kind of buzzwords like gray water and water recycling that the industry likes to throw around. Look at the impacts that these projects will have on the entirety of the watershed and the local resources that are available.
Good question. Is there a stipulation in place that that gray water recycling plant has to be built before operations begin? Or is there a certain timeline that's contracted on when it, because we were promised the same thing in South Haven. We don't have one yet. Memphis was promised the same right across the border. They don't have one yet.
Well, you've got to look at the duration of the construction of the buildings. There are 34 buildings at 250,000 square foot each as part of AWS Phase 1, Phase 2 at the Canton and Ridgeland facility. 6 of those are in production, have been since December. I'm not aware that anybody's had any sort of problems with water or pollution or strain on the electrical grid. Yes, construction is underway right now for the line that leads from Beatty's Bluff wastewater treatment plant directly to the campus. The good news is that Amazon has informed us that the actual water required for the cooling process on the campuses is significantly less than originally estimated. And that's also true for the Nissan facility. Originally, it was estimated, if you look at Wagner Engineering's original plans, to be about 3 million gallons a day. It's only 1 million gallons a day. That's roughly 350 million gallons per year. But Amazon states that the use of water will be 6 to 9 weeks a year at most for the 2 facilities.
But just to clarify, there's no actual stipulation, there's no timeline when they have to have that finished before operations begin or anything, because ours was, they started construction on ours too, and right over the border in Memphis, because we share the same aquifer and it's still not complete. They decided to postpone construction, and unfortunately, none of our local officials got it in writing that it had to be complete before operations begin. And so now we're seeing excess water usage and there's no gray water recycling plant.
Yeah, so the construction is parallel, but based on the progress of both projects, it does appear that the line that will push the wastewater to the facilities for cooling will be in operation before the vast majority of the buildings are actually complete.
Along those lines, I would caution lawmakers and regulators that are making decisions on these projects to not just trust the industry's claims on these sorts of things. If they're saying, hey, look, we can only use water for 4 to 6 months of the year, and that's what you're evaluating the project on, then you need to hold them to that and make sure that they're actually, following those rules and standards that they put out there. Like, it's been said here is like, they were expecting gray water facilities that still haven't been built yet. These things need, they're making claims. There's no requirement that they actually have to follow through on those claims. And once these facilities are built and put out there, there's not much you can do to put new standards on them. So your chance to do that is now. And rushing forward with these projects, expecting these tech industries, companies to do everything they say they're going to do is an unrealistic expectation. And I'm glad to see that, the Nissan facility didn't use as much water as they were planning to use. It seems like a plus for the community. But what happens if it went the other way? And what happens if it goes the other way with these data centers? And so I think those are things that, the committee and other regulators and lawmakers in the state need to be very considerate of, is actually getting these things in writing and making them requirements of data center projects.
A question for Ms. Samsa. Based on your experience in DeSoto County, what would meaningful community notification and engagement have looked like for a large project to before a large project arrived? And what should the state evaluate or review going forward in the instance of other large projects coming to the area or throughout the state?
First of all, I really appreciate your question. That's a great question. I mean, in my case, we didn't have, I would say any notification would have been great for the public. We didn't have anything until it was already said and done and the property had been sold and contracts were in place. We got one Facebook post from Mayor Musselwhite, and that was not everyone's on Facebook, not everyone follows. Obviously, the noise pollution also affects Horn Lake because the power plant is right on the border of Horn Lake and South Haven. Horn Lake residents aren't going to be following usually the South Haven mayor on Facebook, even if they are on Facebook. So, any sort of notification to residents would have been great, especially residents, I would say, within a 3-mile radius, because that's the extent of where the noise pollution travels the most. But especially for things like water use and pollution, just having it listed in city agendas, having announcements, maybe even mailers, especially if you live within a certain mile radius would be great. And as far as things to evaluate beforehand, Olive Branch actually is putting into they're trying to establish some guidelines beforehand for data centers. And I don't necessarily agree with everything that they're trying to put forth, but a lot of their stipulations and reports and data that are required beforehand that they're trying to instill, I agree with. They're trying to make sure that if a data center wants to come to Olive Branch, I believe they have things like how much they have to report, how much water could possibly be used. They have to get independent assessments made by other companies, not ones that are already affiliated and working on behalf of them, but they have to have independent assessments on the noise predicted levels and water usage and all sorts of things like that. So that would be my answer to that question. I hope that answered it well enough.
Ms. Samsa, you had mentioned earlier the turbines. Is that the generators?
Yes, so they are, they're generating power. They have 59, I believe was the latest count on site that are running. None of those have permits. They have permits to construct 41 permanent turbines, but the 59 that are on site right now are not included in that.
Are they enclosed in soundproof buildings?
Not to my knowledge, no, they're not.
And you say they produce a hum?
Yes, I'd be happy to play a quick video if you want to hear what it
No,
sounds
I've
like.
I've probably seen it.
Yeah. It's definitely worse than a hum. It's a roaring sound. There's also a high pitch that comes with it. For residents who live closest by, it's constant. It does not stop even for a second. It has been going on since August of last year. And it keeps children up at night. I have a friend who has children whose grades are slipping in school because they're not sleeping at night. It's really unfortunate and just horrible what's happening right now.
Just the realtor in me would like to know, and I'm not sure if you know this or not, but do you believe the property values are decreasing in that area or increasing in that area?
I would be inclined to believe that they're decreasing. I personally, if I went to go, tour a home that I was interested in buying, and I heard that noise happening and constantly while I was there looking at the home, I wouldn't want to purchase that home, and I would assume most people would not want to either.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Not according to the DeSoto County tax assessor.
Oh, I wasn't aware of any sort of studies that have been done on that, so.
Yeah.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
I have a question for you. You mentioned,
And I'm sorry,
Mississippi-
can you introduce yourself? Because I don't remember who everybody is. So just so I know who's asking the question.
Gregory Austin with the Mississippi Attorney General's office.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You mentioned Mississippi looking at other communities. So are there other states that have either made policy decisions at the state legislative level or regulatory changes that would still encourage growth and economic development, but help with some of the things that you referenced in your presentation, aside from a moratorium on large scale data centers? What states are doing the right things as opposed to all of the concerns that you shared that Mississippi should maybe look at, aside from any straight up ban or moratorium on data centers?
Sure. What we're seeing primarily across the country isn't a comprehensive approach, unfortunately. And Mississippi has an opportunity to lead the way here and actually showing the country how we can develop new technologies in a way that protects the public. Most of the laws that we're seeing on the books so far that are moving across the country deal with questions of ratepayer protections or related to tax abatements. And while the ratepayer protections are certainly important, I haven't seen any that I would say are comprehensive and address the broader concerns of fuel costs. Usually they have to do with assurances and potentially like utility planning. And with the tax abatements in Illinois, and we saw them specifically restrict tax abatements to the local level. And and this is, I think, a really important point you raise here, right? Is that I can't point to anyone who's doing this well. The reality is that the public has become attuned to this issue in really the last 6 to 12 months in a real and meaningful way, and policymakers are just starting to respond to these sorts of issues and start looking into the way that you're looking now. And so I think that the way to think about this isn't so much about what other states have done, because none of them have, really enacted comprehensive policies that will protect the public, but thinking about what can Mississippi do to make sure that your water resources are used for the public benefit, that your energy system is serving the public benefit, and that you're not being taken advantage of by big out-of-state tech companies that are looking to profit off of low energy costs and robust water resources that will potentially be could be put to use in other ways that would be more beneficial to the public.
Thank you.
Ms. Sampson, the turbines in DeSoto County at the XAI facility, I've too heard the recordings of the buzz and the hums and all the reports on that. Are these turbines operating under a temporary exemption from the EPA and the state DEQ, or is this permanent?
They have been given permission from MDEQ to run on what they have said is a temporary basis. They have claimed a year is allowed for temporary, but then they keep adding additional turbines. So, they started in August of last year. Will all 59 of these turbines be gone by this August? I don't know. I don't think so personally, but we have no way to know that.
Yeah, subject to Public Service Commission approval, are you aware? I know we got a couple of them here in the room,
So-
commissioners.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Construction and operation of the turbines, are those subject to the authority and the regulatory scope of the State's Public Service Commission? Are you familiar with that?
So because it's a behind the meter power plant, no. We've emailed with the Public Service Commission before, and they said because it's behind the meter, they're hands off basically.
So the only regulatory body are the environmental entities?
Essentially.
And they
yes.
both signed off on this?
They signed off on the 41 permanent turbines that they did approve a permit for, yes. That have not been built yet.
This is a question for both Mr. Walsh and Ms. Sampson. So this task force is charged with making recommendations to the legislature. We don't write policy, we don't write state law, but we can help provide that recommendation. In your opinion, what is the single most important action we should discuss to recommend that the legislature take back into consideration or refrain from taking into consideration on data center development within this next session?
It's really hard, I think, just to say one single topic, but I mean, I would say that just adding public health experts and environmental scientists in on the conversation, like today, just having other opinions besides those that are probably usually present. I think that incorporating these other topics that sometimes can be more difficult, they're not, it's not always black and white, but I think that incorporating this has to be part of the discussion. The communities that are being impacted have to be part of the discussion because we are who make Mississippi. We are the people who live here. And if you don't have us, then what is Mississippi anymore?
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, there should be a pause on data centers. And within that pause period, there should be a real hard look at where data centers might be appropriate to build in the state and under what circumstances and conditions they might be appropriate to build in the state. And that analysis should not just look at one individual project and what's going on, but thinking about cumulatively, like what can Mississippi actually accommodate and at what cost and at what expense to communities? Because if we're not looking at these things comprehensively, we run the risk of projects being put forward that will degrade the environment. Maybe one of the projects would be fine, but when you put in 9 or 10 of them, they can become problematic. But the decision makers on these local, and county officials many times don't have the ability to actually evaluate those impacts and understand those impacts. They don't have the resources to understand what's happening outside of their community that could still impact their community. And so I would urge Mississippi lawmakers to really take the time to ensure there's a comprehensive study done to understand the cumulative impacts. And that study should also recommend the regulatory framework that should exist in order to protect the public. And that regulatory framework also needs to have the enforcement mechanisms. We saw a project in Georgia that was being built where the company was actually using water behind the meter. And the municipality had no idea that was happening. They found out about it because people's wells were drying up and it warranted further investigation. Those are the sorts of things that should be found out before people's wells are drying up. So it's about not only having those regulations in place and understanding what effective regulations look like in the face of this new and emerging technology, but also having the staff and agencies that are there to actually support the efforts to ensure that those regulations are enforced.
Thank you both so much for being here. Like I said before, we invited many and the two of you took this serious and I appreciate that. It is 5 minutes before the next one. So I would like to go ahead and invite the Public Service Commissioners and DEQ to come to the table, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. And thank you for your service on this commission.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm not in charge. Oh, no. Yeah. Yes. That's the main. It's out, feed and everything. It's around the next. Hey man, how you doing? Good to see you. Dennis, good to see you.
Yeah.
Going to Chicago?
Yeah.
Are you? Good, okay.
I was in Utah last week.
A life of trouble.
Yeah,
When I settled down for a year.
good call. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, Everybody ready?
Hey, how are you? Aaron, good to see you. Let me get my bag out of your way here. I'm sorry. I may crank it up here in a minute. Bunch of stuff on it.
Welcome panelists from MDEQ and Mississippi Public Service Commissioners. Before you present your opening remarks, would you please introduce yourself and your organization? After you have given all your opening remarks, I will invite the task force to present their questions. Please speak into the microphone, press the green button, and put it literally right next to your mouth. This is being recorded, and we want to make sure that the answers are heard clearly. Maybe silence your phones while you're at it. We can start with Commissioner Stamps. Would you like to start introducing yourself?
Thank you, and thank you, members of the committee. My name is DeKeither Stamps. I serve as the Central District Public Service Commissioner.
I'm Chris Wells, Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality.
Okay, make sure your microphone is really close to your mouth when we get started.
Wayne
please.
Carr, Mississippi Public Service, Southern District.
Okay, do y'all each have your opening comments? Okay, go ahead, DeKeither.
I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today as the Central District Public Service Commissioner. I'm not presenting from a pro-data center position or anti-data center position, but rather presenting from a prudent governance position. At this time in our nation's history, we should not assume that we have public trust. We should look at it as a privilege and that's hanging on in the balance. Let me just be direct about our trust. Most folks in America don't trust the government anymore. Imagine that. And we have to do things that will help us and aid us in our ability to govern. And it makes it hard when you're having to govern, as you all know, having to make decisions. You have to ask 1,000 questions and answer the same questions over and over again. How do you build that public trust? And what I'm proposing is the same commitment that I've made as serving as the Central District Commissioner, is to take a step back and commit to some core principles that'll help guide us. And I prepared a letter and I passed it out to each member of the committee. And it basically has some basic guiding points. And those points revolve around protecting our natural resources, ratepayers come first, accountability and transparency, fair cost sharing, real economic return, and infrastructure before incentives. And plainly put, if we commit to a set of guiding principles before we go into negotiations and having to deal with every industrial development, every economic development process, no matter if it's a data center or a Waffle House, all the way down the chain, if we commit to a set of core principles and use those same principles over and over again, in everything we do, it won't change when we do big things. If we're doing little things in a prudent way, when it's time to do big things, we'll have more public trust. And so this is the commitment that I've made in the Central District, whether it be working in issues with Amazon or Compass or Avio, all the way down to local, smaller economic development projects. And this is how we've been able to communicate effectively in these areas without having major turmoil that other areas. Around the country, there are really bad examples of governance when it comes to economic development and specifically data centers. People look online and they see bad governments in other places. Also, in our history, we've had examples as a Mississippi state government of not fulfilling our promises and not living up to some things that were touted. Like when the casinos were ushered into Mississippi and they said, oh, your education system is going to be fine. And here we are several years later, and we're not reaping those rewards of the investments in education from the gaming industry coming to Mississippi, and several other issues where it was paraded as one thing, but the reality is not something that people are realizing in their day-to-day lives. So what I'm asking today is that we take a look at what can we each individually and collectively commit to help build more public confidence? Because we can't just assume that we have public confidence just because people voted for us does not mean that they trust us. We have to build more public trust. And the real fear that many citizens have is not just the data center, because it's a building. The real fear people have is artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence will destabilize this entire country. Artificial intelligence will evolve our ability to govern, our ability to function as human beings to a higher level, but it will be destabilizing. It reminds me of the late 1800s, where most of America was in the furrier business. Something to do with a horse, whether it be grooming, veterinary, horseshoes, maintaining. And then when the car industry came around, those folks in the farrier business who didn't learn what an alternator was, or a starter, or a battery, were totally displaced. We're in that same point today where we're going to have to evolve our workforce, because many of our family members will be unemployed in 20 years. America as a whole has become lazy and unproductive at the basic human level. So we're going to have to work again. We don't need to be sending many of our children to college anymore. We need to be sending 80% of our young people to skilled trades so that they can rebuild our water systems and rebuild our electrical systems and rebuild society. The call on our generation is to be greater than the greatest generation. Many of us that are in government now are in Generation X. We were raised by the greatest generation. So we're in position and we're trained to do this. We can make the long-standing commitments necessary, just like the greatest generation did when they came back from World War II. They raised their children, which were our parents, and then they raised us too. We're the generation that knows what it's like to not have all the utilities in place. We're the last generation that some of us didn't have indoor plumbing. I know in Learned, Mississippi, we didn't get indoor plumbing until 1982. Well, we have to make investments now to rebuild the water systems for the future, because those commitments that were made after the greatest generation came back from the war, we lived off them for a long time, and those investments deflated our utility rates. Now, our entire grid, from electrical to water to gas, and our land preservation needs a recommitment by our own government to make sure that our grandchildren don't have to make these decisions. Most of our skilled trades are retirement age. If you look at the workforces of Entergy or Atmos, most of the folks in the workforce are almost at retirement age or already past retirement age and still working. So my big ask is for this committee to recommend to the legislature that we put skilled trades back in every junior high and high school in Mississippi. What this will do, it will give us a functional population who can basically maintain themselves and be at a basis point for industry to pick those workers up and do something productive with them. If we don't get our young people to the point where they're not 18 years old the first time they pick up a screwdriver, they know the difference between the tools in a toolbox. We have to get our young people prepared for the future that they will face, and the brilliance that they have in them and the skills that we give them will make them more effective in the future. So if we can focus on skilled trades, that'll help buffer the blow, but most citizens are not ready for the full advancement of artificial intelligence, and that's what it should be adding fear to a lot of us, because the population is not ready, and we have to get them ready. So I thank you for your time today, and I yield for any questions.
So it occurred to me that I'm sitting between two of the three commissioners. I'm not sitting in the shoes of Commissioner Brown. I don't know that I could do that, but I do appreciate the opportunity to be here again. I'm Chris Wells, Executive Director of MDEQ, and I have a few slides if they come up. I wanted to start with what our statutory authority and responsibility is. The older I get, the less corny the idea of a mission statement has become to be to me. I truly believe that an organization's mission statement is a core statement or a statement of its core values, so to speak. And our mission statement is to safeguard the health, safety, and welfare of present and future generations of Mississippians by one, conserving and improving our environment and fostering wise economic growth. This balance is explicitly stated in our mission statement. And based on that, as I'll echo Commissioner Stamp saying, I'm here neither for nor against data centers. Our job is to enforce environmental regulations in the state of Mississippi and to not be picking winners and losers as to what type of economic development a particular community might want to engage in. So with this idea of what is our role, what do we not regulate? I think that's important, just for the record. We don't regulate noise or noise pollution. We certainly don't regulate utility rates. We don't deal with traffic, zoning. A lot of the issues that you've heard discussed earlier today are local issues from our perspective, at any rate. What do we regulate? What kind of permits might a data center or any other economic development project might have to have from DEQ? And this is just a list. These are the types of permits that a data center or, again, any other facility might have to have. They're not applicable. All of these are not applicable in every situation. Our primary environmental issues, as y'all have heard and are aware of, tend to be air pollution related, and that's more often related to the associated power generation, not the data centers themselves, except to the extent that backup generators might be involved. Water consumption, habitat loss related to greenfield projects is certainly an issue. And down the road, e-waste and what decommissioning of these types of facilities can and will be an issue. So I was asked specifically to come prepared to talk about water issues today, and I'll be glad to try to answer any other questions you might have, but I did want to focus on water, and I wanted to first start with the statutory, this is a law that's in place currently. And it states that, and gives DEQ responsibility with respect to regulating the use of water, particularly groundwater, but both groundwater and surface water, for the beneficial use of those water resources and to avoid waste and unreasonable use. And we do certainly err on the side of and encourage conservation. We also have regulations currently on the books that I wanted the task force to be aware of. First is this one that specifically states that an industrial permit applicant, this is particular for any water usage, an industrial permit applicant may be required to investigate alternative supplies such as surface water. This is as opposed to groundwater, but surface water, aquifers with poorer water quality, and I'll talk about aquifers in a minute, and treated effluent from wastewater treatment plants. Now, these regulations were in place way before data centers became a thing, right? But there was some foresight and also the fact that to some extent, it doesn't matter whether it's a data center that someone's building or a widget factory of some sort. If they're going to use water, we have the responsibility to regulate that and to manage the water resources of the state. I also wanted to bring this to your attention. This is a regulation that's already on our books. Use of large volumes of groundwater for once-through non-contact cooling purposes is not considered a beneficial use of groundwater resources. Is contrary to the principles of water conservation. And you'll notice there's a 20,000 gallon per day limit for once-through non-contact cooling water. 20,000 gallons, as they say in my neck of the woods, ain't a whole lot, especially when you're talking about a data center. And we have this on the books. Now, that presupposes that we're aware of a facility being constructed. That presupposes that someone comes to us and lets us know what they're proposing to build before they build it. But I did want you to be aware that exists, because one of your charges is to make recommendations. So, just a little, general knowledge and general information. This gives you an idea. This map, I thought this was a good one. This give, I may have failed to mention that what our regulations, the use that our regulations prioritize is public water, drinking water use. It says public use, public water use. We've always interpreted that, and the way it's defined in the regulations is it's as opposed to industrial use, it's drinking water. So we don't want to see, we would not like to see data centers draw down drinking water systems or overload drinking water systems. And that is a concern for us. But I can also say that if a development of any kind, data center or otherwise, is talking with a local municipality and making plans to tap into a drinking water system, we wouldn't necessarily know that. And so that could be an issue in a particular case. But I did just kind of want to give you a feel for, as far as drinking water goes, 90% of our drinking water in the state is derived from groundwater as opposed to surface water, although the next slide will show you some surface water issue. But this, just the red dots on this map show you all of the currently permitted drinking water wells in the state. We are a water-rich state, both groundwater and surface water. It's not to say that we don't have some issues or potential issues developing, particularly with respect to groundwater in certain parts of the state, but we have over 86,000 miles of rivers and streams. We do have a lot of water resources. They're not limitless, but we're not water poor at this point. I mentioned surface water for drinking water. This is surface water withdrawal permits, not just for drinking water, but surface water uses for various purposes. And the reason I say that, or one reason I mentioned is for various purposes, you'll notice the cluster or the coverage in the delta. That's irrigation related surface water diversions. And the next map, as you compare these two, may be striking to some. These are groundwater wells. Since 1985, we've issued over about 30,000 groundwater withdrawal wells. We currently have about 24,000 active groundwater permits. And that's for all manner of uses. This is all of them. And of course, agriculture in the Delta is a big user of that. It's the purpose of that map was not to strike fear of any kind, but it's just to give you an idea of what we're already dealing with in terms of the number of permitted groundwater wells before we talk about data centers. But I also want to make sure that you know that we have, as I mentioned, we're pretty water rich. We have over 18 aquifers, major aquifers underlie the state. There's different depths, different thicknesses, different water levels, different qualities of water within these different aquifers. And monitoring is a big part of what we do, and it's a key factor in all of this. In order for us to fulfill our role, it's important for us to monitor water levels in the aquifers, but also to monitor water usage. And so one of the things that we think will be important as we move forward is to include conditions in groundwater withdrawal permits that would require the collection and reporting of data to us by the users necessary for us to have data to make informed decisions on. And I think this is my last slide here. As far as data centers go in particular, we've only had one permit that we've issued so far related to a data center, and it was actually related to the power plant in DeSoto County. We have issued permits recently for additional water wells for certain cities for their existing wet drinking water systems. That's not explicitly identified to be related to data centers, but we don't necessarily have that information. We did put requirements in that permit to monitor the withdrawal amounts and to report that to us, and to also monitor the water, help us monitor the water levels in that aquifer that it is drilled into. I guess I should emphasize, maybe at the risk of overemphasizing, is that one of the problems that we have is that data center developers are not always coming to us first and foremost, or in the first instance, a lot of times, and not necessarily going to MDA either. We often find out about the projects somewhere along the line during the course of development where we find out about, or where they're going to is the local municipalities and so forth, and where they're wanting to locate or where they're wanting to build. Some of these are build it and they will come type developments. They do have to come to us at some point to get the required permits, but we're not necessarily involved early in the planning process. And it just, what solution there may be to that, I don't know, but it is an issue. Let's see. I will say that water usage is very case specific. Availability of water resources for a particular development is very case specific, site specific. The quality of the water that's available to a particular development is very case specific and site specific. And so we have to address these on their individual merits. And I guess I'll just mention, sort of close my remarks by noting that the National Groundwater Association has issued a position paper that sums things up pretty well. The NGWA supports data center development that embraces the best available technologies to improve efficiency and minimize or eliminate consumptive groundwater use while supporting reliable and sustainable infrastructure growth. And I think that is the reason I think that sums things up pretty well, is I do think, as I believe in everything that DEQ does, environmental protection and economic development are not mutually exclusive concepts. We can do both. We can do both wisely. But it does take, it will take planning and forethought. So with that, I'll close and be glad to answer any questions that I can.
Good evening. I'm Wayne Carr, Mississippi Public Service Commissioner, Southern District. As I thought about this task force and the responsibilities, I'm a historian. I go to look at the past. As you look on the screen, that's my parents' generation and the troubles that they had to overcome after the Great Depression. It was unity in spirit and unity in country and unity in our state. They were sharecroppers, so they know what it's like to work. And in the present, which is everyone in this room, we're called that sandwich generation. It's our decisions that we make here today and in the near future, which seems to be in warp speed, is the future. And that's our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren. I can remember back in the 1980s, my wife's stepdad's a retired Air Force colonel, and he called me Nelson. He said, Nelson, wars will not be fought over oil or gas. In the future, they will be fought over water. And as we've looked into our past, not in a short time ago, out west, they continue to fight over water. If you've been following the Hoover Dam and see where the water level's at, it's very low. I think it's 37 feet before they had to cut the generators off. If we're not careful, as plentiful the water that we have in this state, we will be there also. I think it's very important that everyone here, whether you're here in this room or you're outside listening to it, that we all gather in the conversation. Our state and our leadership has chosen a path, and now we have to work together on it. That's very important. We have to put our issues aside and do what's best for this state and for these data centers, these industries that's come into our state. As I go out through the meetings, and not too long ago, I was in Madison with a group, MISO, which is part of Entergy. That discussion is in that room about where we're at on our grid. And I talk about the grid because it takes electricity to pump water out of the ground. It takes water to make electricity. So it's a revolving cycle. So we all have to work together. And these utility companies are working together. They are communicating. And I believe it's very important that each branch of government reaches across the aisle with an open mind and say, let's work together. Sometimes I don't think we've done that in the past. We've got our feelings in the way. We've got pride in the way. And the Bible says, pride cometh before a fall. I believe if we work together, this will just be a small blimp on the radar in our state. We can show the rest of the states of how to do it. We've already done that in a lot of areas, in my opinion. I think that as we move forward, what we do now will affect that future. And I believe that data centers are part of our solution. And we have to be slowly and meticulously of what we decide in the near future. Thank you.
We'd like for you to yield for questions now. Do we have any questions from our task force? I'm sure we do. Who's going to be the first to ask that question? You can go ahead.
So again, thank you all for being here this afternoon. So from what's been discussed and to my understanding, we have water permitting that sits with MDEQ, energy oversight with the commission, yet a single data center project touches on both. In your opinion, where do your jurisdictions overlap? And are there aspects of a project of this scale that no agency currently reviews? Commissioner Carr.
Yes. I think there's a very important part of this equation I haven't heard much talk about. And that's the heat domes that the data build up around them. Some of the research that I've looked at, they're starting to try to understand that about the heat domes. It's raising the air temperature between 5 degrees Fahrenheit and 15. By doing that, you're creating a heat dome that affects the surrounding communities. I think that's very important because the more heat you create, the more air conditioning you have to use in those communities. And so with data centers, we're already using about 40% of that cooling for keeping the units, the CPUs and all the data equipment and everything there that's a part of the cooling. So about 40% of that. I think there needs to be some studies done on that. I'm not aware of, I know we don't regulate the environmental impact on the heat. Maybe Commissioner Wells does, but I think that's a part that we're missing in this whole equation with data centers. And it's not just a data center. I'm not just picking on them. I just think that in general, industrial sites too need to look at that too. Power companies are already create a lot of heat from that, but they're doing it in such a very, in my mindset, a common sense standpoint. They're aware of these issues, but I don't think that the data side of it is aware of those issues. And there's more and more conversation on that area as I research it. Thank you.
I would say that we're pushing every extent of the law that we've been given, there are some things that we can do to be better. But the first thing as elected officials, whether you're right wing or left wing, we have to commit to saving the bird. The wings are not going to save the bird unless they work together. So we have to work together and make good decisions first off. It won't matter if you're ruby red or baby blue. If the bird dies, we all die. So we have to make sure that the first stop we need to do is, like Commissioner Carr said, is to continue to do what we've been doing and do it better and garner more public trust. Our biggest gap moving forward is the low amount of public trust that we have from the citizens who put us here. We have to get that part shored up so that we can move forward. We can approve sites, we can approve the scale of operations, but if we don't sow up public trust, we won't be able to move forward and move this state forward. And also we have to respond to Mississippi's military obligation. The southeastern section of the United States depends on Mississippi having the technology infrastructure in place so that when this nation is defending itself, the shoreline of Mississippi is going to have computing power for military operations in the Gulf. So we need to balance all this out, not just the demands of the future, but right now, Mississippi is behind the 8 ball when it comes to our data processing ability as a state. So we're going to have to move forward, and we don't have time to wait. Time is moving fast, and we do not have time to sit idly by and watch what other states are doing. We have to take the best of what we know right now and move on several projects immediately.
I would like to, I guess, say that I don't know that it's so much an issue of overlap of jurisdiction. I think that when it comes to DEQ's jurisdiction versus the PSC, it's not unlike the limitation of our jurisdiction versus local governance. If a facility, if power generation meets all of the requirements of the PSC in order to be built, our role is to determine what air emissions that power generation is going to have, what water usage, what water discharge, and to permit that in accordance with the regulations and environmental or water quality and air quality standards that exist. If a facility is properly zoned, yes, we have siting criteria within certain of our regulations for different types of facilities. As long as those siting criteria are met, as long as the facility is located is being built and located in a place that's properly zoned, we don't have a regulatory basis to intervene in those issues. Yet those are the types of things that our permit board gets hit with, so to speak, in controversial cases, controversial matters. Most of the issues are things that are beyond our jurisdiction. We don't regulate noise. We don't regulate whether or not a power plant, power generation unit should be constructed. We just regulate the air emissions from it once someone else has approved it. I hope that helped.
Yes, thank you all.
I have a question. Public perception is that Senate Bill 2001 that was put into law in 2024 stripped all authority from the PSC over the data centers. Would you explain how you exercise control over the energy infrastructure, the utility rates, and electric reliability associated with those projects?
Well, what I'll say is, in our office, we've changed how we work. We have an investigative arm in the Central District Office, just like the other commissioners, but the majority of the data center development has been in the Central District. So I've assigned 2 staff positions to specifically focus on economic development and the projects therein. Only a small fraction of the economic development projects in the Central District are regulated in that Senate bill. In Meridian, we have the Compass Data Center, which is not a part of that, And in Rankin County, there's Evio, which is not a part of that. So there's only a small portion of our economic development that is referenced in that bill. But we've proven that we can regulate, and we didn't even, the bill was necessary in that moment, but we've proven that we can effectively, through our formula rate plan, execute a data center in Compass, like in Meridian or in Brandon. So we can use the normal process of intervention and filing formula rate plans and work on normal processes without the use of that bill. But I'm open to discussing any changes that anybody would like to make to see how we can be more effective. I'm not going to push away from any additional abilities that the legislature would like to give us to regulate. The prudency review process, I don't see where it's going bad as far as Amazon and Entergy is concerned in that bill right now. But if I do see something or smell something happening in the future, I'll let you know.
Ms. Ford, can you repeat that question one more time?
Absolutely. Really, I felt like because Amazon is in my district, that was the question that I felt like was specific to Amazon. But yes, you most definitely. The public perception is that Senate Bill 2001 that was passed in 2024 stripped all authority from the PSC over the data centers. Explain how you exercise control over the energy infrastructure, the utility rates, and the electric reliability associated with those projects.
Thank you. You're correct that the public sees that we were stripped of that ability. But I'll say this, Entergy and Mississippi Power have communicated well to me, way beyond, I think, in a lot of areas. They haven't disclosed anything, but I feel a comfort level there with working with them, that they're looking out for the ratepayers and they're looking out for that data center also. That's the balance that the Public Service Commission brings to the table. In this particular instance, that balance was taken away, but I believe that with all of my heart that they are doing the right things. Did they get it right? I don't know. But there's always room for improvement. This decision, I understand the decision being a businessman. Some things have to be kept confidence till everybody's name's on the bottom of the paper. And I do believe that the state leadership has done a great job in providing this industry to come into our state that gives us the opportunity to work together. And I think that's most important because a lot of states in our country don't have this opportunity. And we've been given this opportunity. And some of the decisions that are being made with AWS and Entergy is being echoed throughout our country. They're looking at us as the model. And I think that's a great compliment for their hard work that they have done and for what y'all have done. Thank you.
I have a question.
Just a question, it's Director Wells, you may be able to answer this for me. So my office receives federal funds for the security of the state of Mississippi through Homeland Security. If we put up a fence, a camera, we have to do an environmental impact study. Does it affect the ground tortoise or some little bird or anything like that? So for these facilities, are there environmental impact studies done? And if so, who does those, either for the local jurisdiction or for the business, to see what that actually how that would impact the environment?
Appreciate the question. So generally speaking, an environmental impact statement is something that's going to be driven by the National Environmental Policy Act. If there's not federal money involved, then it generally doesn't apply. We don't have any sort of general regulatory requirement for environmental impact studies of the type that you're referring to. Now, on a case-by-case basis, project by project, and depending on the types of permits that they may need to have, there are certain requirements that they have to meet related to those particular types of permits. Water usage was one of the main thing I was focusing on today, using that as an example. Someone's going to apply for a groundwater withdrawal permit from us. If it's a 6-inch or bigger well, they have to have a permit from us, and they have to tell us what aquifer they're going to draw from, how much they propose to draw on a daily basis, what they're going to use it for, and all those kinds of things, so that we can then determine whether or not that proposed action fits within the regulations. I hope that helped.
One thing, my first conversation about data centers was in 2014 when I was on the city council in Jackson. I was at a conference and one of my friends was a council person in Norfolk, Virginia, where they have 4 major data centers in that area. And we were looking at ways to solve our water problems. And they were telling us that, well, they use a lot of water. And I was like, well, does the water have to be clean? And they were like, no. And the first proposal I even looked at was taking sewer water from the Savannah Street plant in Hines County and put it into a data center to use that water back in 2014. Now, some people thought I wanted to be the mayor of Jackson, and that proposal kind of washed away. But the essence of it turned into what happened in your district, Representative Ford, and the use of reclaimed water. Our first thing that we should do when they're talking about data centers should be using water that the citizens don't want to pay for. One of the biggest bills that the citizens don't want to pay for in the water conversation is sewer. So if you have a customer for sewer, then you can have a direct impact on the citizens' water bills because their water bills will be lower and their infrastructure will be fixed. The big elephant in the room in the utility space is who's going to pay to fix the grid, whether it's electrical or gas or water or sewer. And industrial clients will be necessary in Mississippi to fix all of our grids because our citizens do not have the resources. The federal government is broke. The state of Mississippi does not have the money to fix the grids. So now we either have industry or we have citizens. The citizens do not have the resources to fix their aging utility grids. We have cases right here in my service area where literal transformers are falling off the poles. That's what low rates get you. All these low rates for the last 40 years have been at a detriment. We shouldn't be looking for a low rate or a high rate, just the correct rate to maintain the systems. And if the citizens don't want the correct rate, then as a regulator, we still have to put the correct rate on the table. Back in the Greatest Generation, when they put these things in place, they put rates in place and they had real poor people. Remember on the stores, they had and the businesses had a little sign that says no shirt, no shoes, no service. That's because people were coming there with no shirt, no shoes, and they were refusing to serve them. I bring that up because the regulators in that day told those people, this is the rate you will pay or you won't even have service. We have to have a backbone as regulators to set the appropriate rate in place and make the decisions that are necessary. That's why nobody wants to be a public service commissioner, because our job is to set the rate. But we have to have a backbone and set the correct rate. Low rates in this state over the last 30 years have led to the drastic issues that Winter Storm Fern unveiled. It ripped the Band-Aid off. The state went to 5 degrees for an extended period of time, and half the state's power failed and water systems failed all over the state because people were not raising rates and fixing infrastructure. And we're going to have to fix infrastructure and strike a balance between what the citizens can afford and what we can get industry to shoulder the balance of. But we must set the correct rates in our systems and not always look for someone else to help us pay our bills. The welfare state of Mississippi, and it's just not poor people. We got people who are wealthy who don't want to pay a higher water bill. And I'm thank goodness that the Supreme Court backed us up in our Canton rate case, where we're just trying to set a correct rate. And I got rich and poor people mad because I'm just doing my job to make sure my systems don't fail. Because who's hurt the most when systems fail? Poor people are hurt the most because they don't get any more food stamps when their deep freezer their light's been off for 2 days and all their food spoiling in their refrigerator. We don't get that. Even in Mississippi or in Michigan, when your lights are off longer than a certain period of time, you get a bill credit on your next month's bill and it penalizes the utilities for your lights being out. We don't have those kinds of things. So we must have reliable service. In Chicago, when it's -5 degrees outside, they're still door dashing. In Mississippi, when it's 5 degrees outside, all our systems fail. So we're going to have to put major investments in place for our utility grids to maintain themselves. And who's going to pay for it? Either the citizens or the industry, but those investments must be made.
Commissioner Stamps, first, you're way too young to have parents that are of the greatest generation.
I was raised by my grandparents.
I got you. Were you guys, was the commission involved in approving the some $2 to $3 billion investment in generation and transmission by Entergy Mississippi that is expressly designed to accommodate the increased load from the data centers in Entergy Mississippi's footprint, which, as you know, but for the benefit of everyone else, is like the western half of the state of Mississippi. Was the commission involved in the approval of that?
We were involved in several steps along the process, and we're also saving tax bases. The Baxter Wilson plant in Warren County in Vicksburg was closed down. It had been closed down for years with no plan of reopening it. In Greenville, Mississippi, it was due to be decommissioned at that power plant. Those investments would not happen without the Senate bill you referenced, nor Amazon Web Services coming to Mississippi. But those tax bases, you put $1.6 billion in Washington County, Mississippi, those are resources that 5 supervisors can now pave roads with. They can fix streets. Warren County, heck, they had to scuffle around because their school district budget was $1 million short, and they wouldn't even be able to pay their share over the course of the summer without major industry coming to that county. So we're going to have to balance. Our situation is our citizens are getting poorer, our industrial services are getting weaker when it comes to our grids. Who's going to pay for it? But those tax bases are suffering, and we're saving tax bases through economic development. And that's the hard work, but that's the fruit on the other end of the hard work that we're all doing.
So just to clarify, private utility companies such as Entergy are subject to the state's ad valorem taxes,
Correct.
about half of which goes to school districts.
Correct.
And how do you expect that these investments by Entergy in new generation and transmission, two-part question, will affect future rates of average consumers and also reliability of, you've talked about this on my show. You just made a reference to that. If a poor person loses their electricity, melts down everything in their freezer, that's a huge hardship on them. How will it affect reliability?
Well, the first thing that affect reliability, Mr. Gilbert, is take Hinds County, for example. Hinds County and the city of Jackson receive a little over $40 million every year from Entergy Mississippi when they pay their property taxes. Well, that means Hinds County needs to fix the right-of-ways. The right-of-way clearing should be clear all across Hinds County. That's going to affect reliability because now Entergy trucks don't have to come through with chainsaws and clear a road, because if the right-of-way is clear going down the road, if a tree falls, it's going to fall away from the road. So local government needs to take the resources that they receive from property taxes from utilities and do their job and fix the right-of-ways, and that will help your streets last longer because water and ice melt faster. If your streets are covered with shade, it's going to be iced over longer. So reliability can be affected directly if people not just understand the functions of government, but understand the systems of government. The reason you're getting that 30% tax on public utilities for a county is to fix the dadgum right away. Is to fix those things that local government needs to do in order to aid for reliability across the state.
Also, it's understood that the North Campus in Madison County of AWS, that would be the Canton campus, will use reclaimed water for cooling, but the south, the Ridgeland campus will actually use traditional well water from the Ridgeland water surface. Amazon has provided some $40 million to the city of Ridgeland to improve its ability to accommodate this additional draw on the water supply. Is that something that flows through the Public Service Commission when a private company decides just to make such a gift, an investment?
Well, it doesn't flow through for approval for the Public Service Commission, but the difference that we bring to the table is we've served at the local level, at the state level, and now as the commission. So we are thoroughly, I spend half my day talking about civics and figuring out how do you solve this problem and connect this problem. I talk to mayor, I got 95 mayors, a little over 600 aldermen and city council people, and 110 supervisors and state reps and state senators, just figuring out the systems of government and how to get it to work together. And that's the piece that we're missing. The politics helps you get elected, but in order to govern, you have to govern. That the job is governing. And I think we spend too much time on the politics, but the governance portion, putting the X's and O's in place and executing what government is supposed to do. Government is supposed to be boring. My mom was at the post office for 30 years, and my dad was at the USDA for 40 years. We need to get back to regular, boring, nerdy government people. The Democrats, the Republicans, the politics of it has clouded the whole government, where government needs to get back to being boring and prudent versus, populist.
Turn you into the Maytag repairman. Remember that? You're
Right,
old up to
right.
remember that. So.
Right.
Commissioner Carr, go ahead.
Your question, Gerard, was, does the Public Service Commission approve those rates? Yes, but there's a catch-all in it. In the legislation, it's my understanding, if the utility staff says it's prudent, and we review it and it says it's prudent, those costs are legit, yes. But they don't need our vote to get that rate. I just want to clarify that.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Carr. What Commissioner Stamps has said, and he knows I've asked him this question many times, and I may paraphrase you, and I don't want to misrepresent what you said here. Please correct me if I do, is that you believe that all consumers of electricity should pay fairly for all of that which they consume. That would
Correct.
include data centers, right?
And the data centers and every other industry, because data centers are not the most natural resource intensive industry. I mean, you look at the grid that you showed about the wells, the farmers. I'm a farmer myself. We draw water out the ground, sprinkle ammonium nitrate on the ground. Some of it absorbs into the water, into the ground. Some of it runs off into a water system, which has to be purified before it comes to your glass, before you drink it. Well, many other industries put pollutants in water, and we have to balance all those industries. A lot of energy is being put on data centers, but across the entire spectrum, heck, Nissan uses more water than the Amazon campus does. So we have to put the balance of it on all industries. And the data center in Clinton won't even use water. So the technology is evolving. We have to evolve with it and beyond it so that it doesn't get in front of us.
We have a few minutes left, so I want to wrap things up. Again, thank you all for your time this afternoon. This is the same question I posed earlier and be reiterated to all of you. In your opinion, what is the single most important action that this task force should discuss in recommending that the legislature consider or refrain from considering on data center development in this upcoming session?
If we want to have a competition about who has the most thankless job, I'm not sure which one of us will win. So I'm going to defer to the elected officials on that.
Wayne, go ahead.
Repeat that question one more time, sir.
What is the single most important action that this task force should discuss in our recommendations to the legislature? Either something we should do or we should refrain from doing, specifically as it relates to the conversation of data centers?
Okay, are we talking across the board? Or are we just talking particularly about water?
Across the board in general.
Across the board, I think, in my opinion, that the cyber should be addressed. The guardrails that should be put on the information that's inside there. The question also comes into the future that what is being stored in those data centers? So if something's being stored and the leadership of our country decides that those data centers cannot shut down, that we have to start having load shed on businesses and residential. Who makes that choice? Who makes that choice to do that load shed and keep that data center on? That happened last week in the PGM area, that RTO. They seen that their grid system was in trouble. So they asked the data centers to go offline. And so they went offline and started running up on backup generator. Then you have a real question that comes to the table. So MDEQ has to look at the air quality and how long they're running. So that question needs to be discussed because if we're not careful, that will happen here in this state. It also happened last Memorial Day weekend in 25 in Louisiana. They did a load shed. And we have yet to this day, and I said it in the last docket, we have yet to this day heard from an RTO that gave us a reason why that load shed happened. Now, on our own, with the commissioners in Louisiana and Arkansas, we figured out some things, but they didn't acknowledge it. And we need to be concerned about load shed. Also, I think that we're talking about water and reusing the wastewater or the grade water, as we call it, is the discharge when they use the water and when they put it back out in the environment. I don't know, Mr. Wells can answer the question. Are we checking that water monitoring as it goes out? Because also in this state and throughout this country, we have what we call forever chemicals, the PFAS, those forever chemicals that's going to be, are they going to be discharged out? Are they treating that? So that's another question I would have. The other question I would have is with energy companies, utility companies, on their forecast. As we, in the past, that on the metering side, that we have what we call smart meters, and we have a statewide, on the electrical side, we have these smart meters on gas. We have now implemented a program with one of our statewide water companies where they're having to put in. So they are forecasting models, not a day ahead. They can be less than 24 hours. They can be less than 6 hours of these day ahead models. So we need to implement and encourage them to use that information to keep everyone abreast of where we're at. Because I feel like that in the past 10 or 15 years, we cannot use that historical data. And from now to like 2028, the history that we're involved in now, we won't be able to use from 28 and beyond because everything is changing so fast. The data centers themselves, their efficiency on inside on their units, on their CPUs, on all the data equipment in there is getting more efficient. So that electricity that they're using and the water is going to be less and less and less. If you remember, back in my time frame, 30, 40 years ago, we had that tower underneath the table. And as technology went on, it kept reducing and reducing and reducing down to where I can do on this what I used to do on a tower underneath the table. So by that being said, also that heat's going to go down, that load's going to go down. So as we move into the future, those data centers are going to use less and less electricity and less utilities. So their cost is going to come down. We don't know at the commission how long these contracts are good for. So what's going to happen if that contract ends in 2000 or 15 years from now or 10 years from now? They come back and do a contract, and then that contract, they reduce their usage, which is going to, that cost is not going to go away when we put these power plants in that, yes, we did approve. But those costs are not going to go away in 15 years. They're still going to be there. Who's going to pay for them? The ratepayer? So it's the future that I'm looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carr. Director Wells and Commissioner Stamps, if you got something brief, just to keep us on track, we'd appreciate it.
Just real briefly, I'll let Commissioner Stamps have the last word. All kidding aside, I will say that, as I said earlier, our job is not to pick winners and losers between one economic development project and another, one type of facility and another. I would say that if there's anything that the legislature needs to consider is whether or not there's any additional or any data center specific regulation that the legislature would like to see us do. Otherwise, we treat all projects the same. They all have to meet the same standards, whether they have a wastewater discharge, a water withdrawal usage, or air emissions, or whatever it is. They have the same standards apply to everybody across the board. So.
And I'll just finish briefly and say, my ask of everyone is to get more public trust. The commitment of the things that we put forward in this pledge will help do that. We also need to focus on non-data center power generation, because as this industry scales and they say it no longer needs the power plant in Vicksburg or the one in Greenville, the citizens in those areas will be benefiting from those things for 100 years. So let's make sure we use the industries that we're recruiting to put in place infrastructure that the citizens can use long after their industry may need it or not. And that goes to getting us to nuclear. The citizens of Mississippi do not have the money to get us to nuclear, but economic development does. The more we get to nuclear, the better we are in producing more nuclear, because too much of our power in Mississippi is leveraged on natural gas. We don't control those fuel prices. Washington, D.C. and global players do. So when there's a war overseas, the price of gas goes up. That means your light bills are going to go up, because 78% of our power across Mississippi is from natural gas, and Mississippi Power's footprint, it's going to be over 95% of the power from Mississippi Power is going to come from natural gas next year. That's very volatile for a whole service territory to not be diversified. So we need to get more nuclear. The citizens can't afford it, and industry is going to have to be leveraged in order to get us to more nuclear capacity in the state.
Thank you all so very much for being here. I know you had to drive, Commissioner Carr, and I appreciate that. And I just appreciate all of you for making time for this today. You are excused, and the next panel needs to come to the table. But you can, we're just going between breaks. Let's go on and get back. You need to go to the bathroom? Yeah, that's tomorrow, right?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah. How'd that stuff have anything?
Well, I
Thanks.
don't know.
Right there.
I know, right? Look, I was told I could talk about anything, so I'm gonna talk all about things. I'm not gonna. Do it all. You know, we're gonna have questions. No, it's gonna come sit with me. Take all the hard stuff out. I'm gonna be the executive director. I'll be the brawn, she'll be the brains.
All right, that's it.
Right.
Okay, let's get started.
All right.
I'll give you this.
Okay.
Welcome panelists from Entergy and Mississippi Power. Before you present your opening remarks, would you please introduce yourselves and your organization? After you have given your opening remarks, I will invite the task force to present their questions. Please speak into the microphone and you push the green button. Make sure you pull it up to your mouth, please.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Vanderloo, Vice President of
Right here, right here.
Vice President of Business Operations and Strategy for Entergy Mississippi.
Stephen Schruff, I'm General Manager of Transmission for Mississippi Power.
Opening remark.
All right, well, good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm here to talk about what data center growth is doing for Entergy Mississippi's customers across our 45 county service area. And despite what some of the folks who talked about earlier today might have indicated, Mississippi is leading the way when it comes to data centers. Data center growth is driving over $30 billion of investment in Entergy Mississippi service territory. It's creating thousands of permanent jobs, and it is driving tens of millions of dollars of annual tax revenues. Madison County just recently disclosed what its tax revenues are, and as you can see from those numbers, they are significant. And we're also seeing growth in other industries, and I think this is a story that's not being talked about enough in Mississippi. We're seeing growth in the construction industry and the data center supply chain industry and in the service industry. And in Western Mississippi, where we serve electric service, we have companies like Modine, ABB, Fabricated Pipe, MMR, and Siemens, who've announced expansions because they provide the infrastructure needed to support data center growth. And in other parts of the state, we've seen expansions by Howard Industries and Keytronic. And in total, these industries are investing over $750 million and providing over 4,000 permanent jobs. These are not jobs at data centers, but these are jobs that exist because of data centers. Entergy Mississippi, as we talked about, you heard earlier, has 3 gas power plants under construction in Washington, Warren, and Madison counties. These represent investments of over $3 billion. We have solar sites being developed in DeSoto County, Bolivar County, Tallahatchie, and Washington counties. These projects provide construction jobs, permanent jobs, and additional tax revenues for those counties. What a great story that more than 80 Mississippi-based companies are doing work on AWS and Entergy projects today. These projects are putting Mississippians to work. And everything I just described started with Senate Bill 2001. To understand why that legislation was so important, you need to look at the challenges that Entergy Mississippi was facing before the first data center ever came to Mississippi. As you know, the United States is seeing demand for electric growth like we have not seen in a generation, and arguably like we've never seen before in the history of this country. At the same time, we're dealing with a supply chain that still hasn't recovered from the full impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so as demand for electricity increases, it's putting a strain on the supply chain and it's driving up the cost to produce electricity for everyone. And the problem we had in Entergy Mississippi is we did not have growth that could help offset these rising costs. And that meant that rates were going to have to go up. Why is that necessarily the case? Because when you look at a utility rate at its basic form, it's the cost of providing electricity divided by the volume of sales, and that's how the Public Service Commission determines the rate at its basic level. And so you have costs going up and sales remain flat, rates would have to go up to help reflect those higher costs. Now, our employees work hard to manage costs within our company. But there are things outside the control of those employees that we can't manage. Some of those things are here on the slide. We've been serving customers in Mississippi for over 100 years, and while our infrastructure can last for decades, it eventually has to be replaced. And the cost of replacing that infrastructure has gone up significantly in the last few years. Transformers, which are an important component for serving residential, small commercial, and industrial customers, we've seen those costs go up 42% just over the last 3 years. Breakers, which are an important reliability component, again, for all customers, we've seen those costs go up 50% over the last 3 years. And I mentioned those two categories of equipment, not just because the costs have gone up, because those are the categories of equipment we buy the most of at Entergy Mississippi. And so when the equipment that you buy the most of is going up by over 40 to 50%, you know that your costs are going up. Power generation is another area where we're seeing cost increases. It's just since the beginning of this century, we have retired roughly 2/3 of our entire generating fleet. And by the end of this decade, we will have retired what's the equivalent of the remaining third of it. And when I retire a generating facility, I have to replace it with the exact amount of capacity, megawatt for megawatt, to provide the same level of reliability for existing customers. And so while the cost of, while those new generation is more efficient and more reliable than the generation that's being replacing it, which is generation that was built for us as far back as the 1940s, and the current plants that will be retiring soon were built in the 70s with probably 1960s technology. Newer plants are more efficient and more reliable, but they cost a lot more too. And just in the last 2 years, we have seen the cost of power plants double. Weather risks are another challenge for our industry. NOAA has reported that 2025, Mississippi saw twice as many tornadoes as it did in 2024, and 2024 was not a small year for tornadoes. We are seeing thunderstorms that pack tropical storm level winds, thunderstorms with 80+ mile-an-hour winds. And unlike tropical storms, these thunderstorms hit much more frequently, and we can't predict where they're going to hit. And so these tremendously impactful storms are creating a lot of damage. As I mentioned, the cost of replacement equipment is higher, so that's driving up costs. And so we saw the reality of what was happening. Costs were going up significantly. We had no real load growth here in Mississippi, and we knew that was going to create a trajectory of rates that was going to be unsustainable for our customers. So we knew we had to do something about it. And we set out to try and find some kind of new customers that could come and help move the needle on this type of growth. And so we had been talking to AWS for a number of years about how could we recruit a data center to Mississippi. And finally, they came to us with a project. And when they did, that project had an incredibly fast need for electric service. So in April of 2023, AWS came to us with a project and said, we need electric service in 20 months. And we went to our construction group, our capital projects group, and said, can we do this? And they said, no, it's going to take at least 48 months and probably a lot longer. And we said, if we tell AWS it's going to be 48 months, they're not going to come to Mississippi. So we sat down with our group and we said, what are the blockers that are keeping us from getting to 20 months? And the first one was equipment availability. We don't own the transformers of the size we need to provide service to AWS anywhere. We don't have those anywhere in the inventory in Entergy Mississippi. It's a 48-month lead time just to get that equipment. So we worked with our supply chain. We found new vendors. We qualified them, made sure they were going to provide reliable equipment. We got with AWS and got a reimbursement agreement in place so we could order that equipment, knowing that if the deal never materialized, our customers would not be on the hook for those dollars. Our company would not be on the hook for those dollars. AWS was going to reimburse us. So we continued to identify blocker after blocker. How do I get from that 48+ months down to 20 months? And the one blocker that we couldn't control at Entergy was a state law that said before you can build the infrastructure needed to serve a customer of this size, you must get a certificate of public convenience and necessity from the Public Service Commission. And the primary purpose for that certificate was to demonstrate a need for the infrastructure. Are you building infrastructure actually needed to serve customers, or are you building additional infrastructure that's not really needed? And we have in our schedule a placeholder that says that's a 12-month process. Sometimes it's shorter than that. Sometimes it's longer than that, depending on the complexity of the infrastructure being proposed. But our schedule had no time for any kind of approval by the Public Service Commission. As I mentioned, we could not begin construction until we had that approval. So we worked with Mississippi Development Authority, talked to the governor's office, and we worked with our legislative leaders. And they came to the conclusion that if you have signed an agreement with a large customer like this, that will demonstrate the need for the infrastructure, and the legislature could grant a certificate of public convenience and necessity once that happened. And so we went from a 12-month schedule blocker to a 0-day schedule blocker because of Senate Bill 2001. So as I mentioned, in April 23, AWS came to us with a project. Senate Bill 2001 was passed in January of 24. We finalized the agreement with AWS in March of 2024, and we immediately were able to mobilize on the construction site and begin construction that month. And in December of 2024, we had placed in service the largest customer-serving substation ever built by Entergy Mississippi. And AWS took service the next month. This is a picture of what that campus in the Madison mega site looked like roughly a year ago. And you can see on the top right, there's some substation that I was referring to. In the middle of the picture are the AWS data center buildings. South of this in Ridgeland, there's another data center campus that started taking power earlier this year. None of this would exist without Senate Bill 2001. Senate Bill 2001 passed with near unanimous support of the legislature because our governor and our state leaders asked the right question from the start. How do we encourage this large investment while still protecting existing customers? Bringing AWS to the state of Mississippi brought a new industry, and it elevated the profile of the state. Once AWS had announced they were coming, we had other large-scale data centers come to Mississippi. AWS expanded into its Vicksburg campus, and then just last month, AWS had a ribbon cutting for its Clinton campus. And again, all of this started with Senate Bill 2001. But I'm most excited about what this means for our customers at Entergy Mississippi. Under Superpower Mississippi, we're able to invest an additional $300 million on grid reliability for a total commitment of almost $1 billion. Over this 5-year period, we're targeting to reduce outages by 50% by the end of 2030, and we can do this all at no additional cost to existing customers related to this reliability spend. And it's the revenues from this new growth that are making this possible. As I said before, when you have higher sales volume to spread those costs over, it's going to produce a lower rate. So here we are, last year at a Mississippi Public Service Commission Grid Summit, less than 2 years after Senate Bill 2001 had passed, we announced that we were projecting customer rates would be 16% lower by 2030 than they otherwise would have been. And I'm going to save for questions if you want to know more about how we came up with that projection, but for brevity in my comments, I'm going to skip that for now. The really important thing about this projection is what it shows is that we're actually able to do more for customers, because prior to AWS, I couldn't have spent that additional $300 million on reliability. And I'm going to spend that additional money and still produce a bill that's lower than it otherwise would have been for customers. And how is this possible? We announced a Fair Share Plus program is the way that we approach all of our data center customers. And what that means is they're not just paying the incremental cost to serve them for the new infrastructure, they're also paying part of the embedded cost of the system. And that's again where that higher sales volume helps offset everyone's cost to lower that rate. And so as a result of the contract design, both with AWS and other large-scale customers, the revenue is offsetting the incremental costs. And what that means, despite what others are asserting, customer rates today, residential rates, are actually lower than they would have been if AWS was not a customer of Entergy Mississippi. And that differential is very small today, but as AWS ramps up at its Madison site, at its Ridgeland site, and at ultimately its Vicksburg site, that differential is going to grow to about $30 a month. So by 2030, we are projecting residential customer bills are going to be $30 a month less than they would have been if this data center growth had not come. What's exciting about this number too is this number was from last year, so it does not reflect the higher sales volume that's going to result from the new Clinton campus expansion of AWS. This estimate does not include the higher sales volume that we're going to see from ABB, Modine, and Siemens expansions. And so as Western Mississippi continues to grow because of this data center demand, we are going to see even better impacts for our residential rates. Now, our data center contracts contain strong protections to make sure that these benefits will materialize. I was at the Grid Summit last summer, and I talked at that Grid Summit about the protections that are in our contracts. And it starts with a minimum bill for these large customers to make sure that we're collecting revenue that is going to offset the cost to serve them. And we set a contract term that is sufficiently long that these minimum bills will collect that revenue over the length of the contract. And then we have termination provisions. So if a customer were to walk away from the system, our existing customers in Energy Mississippi are not paying the cost that we incurred to serve that customer. And the final protection to make sure that we can enforce these contract terms is we have very clear collateral requirements. So there is collateral backing up these commitments, so they are on the hook to carry through with their commitments. Now, we are under very strict oversight of our projects. And as you can imagine, these are some of the most scrutinized projects that we have ever built at Entergy Mississippi. And our projects are audited by an independent auditor. They're then separately and independently reviewed by the public utility staff, who has its own professional consultants. So these project costs are reviewed twice before they go to the commission. And the commission retains its full authority over what costs ultimately end up in customer rates. Senate Bill 2001 did not change that. And so you can be confident in our lower bill projections because the people who are responsible for protecting existing customers have access to the information they need to verify this. The commissioners or their staff and the public utility staff have seen the AWS contract. They have seen the protections that we've included in there for customers, and they have seen the amount of revenues that we are collecting from AWS that go into rates to offset the costs of the infrastructure we're building. And so this is why to date they have approved our requests. And the commission is going to continue to have access to the information they need to hold us accountable and to make sure that we are getting the right results for our customers. Nothing in Senate Bill 2001 has taken away the commission's rate authority over AWS related projects. Now, there's a national debate about whether data centers benefit or burden existing utility customers, and Mississippi answered that question before the first data center came to this state. Governor Reeves and our legislative leaders set the standard with Senate Bill 2001 that said this data center must provide economic benefits to our customers. And the Public Service Commission is holding us to that standard. If you want to know more about what we are doing with data centers and how they're impacting our customers, we have a website at entergy.com/data centers, and we continue to update that with the latest information available. When it comes to data centers, Mississippi got it right from the start. Data centers are bringing new jobs, they're bringing new tax revenues, and they are attracting additional growth to the state. Because of data centers, we are able to lower the trajectory of future rates for our customers while we improve reliability faster than we ever have before. And because of data centers, we are able to provide our customers more and better power at a lower cost. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you, Representative Ford and other task members for having me here today with Jeremy to speak with you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about Mississippi Power and how we provide our customers and communities in 23 counties of Southeast Mississippi, and we're privileged to serve them. We've been doing this for more than 100 years, and we serve more than 194,000 customers. Our footprint is diverse and continues to be one of the most dynamic regions in the state. We serve communities of all sizes from Meridian to the Mississippi Gulf Coast, whether that be large industrial customers, small businesses, and homes in rural areas. Each of our customers have needs that are unique to them, but they all maintain the same expectation of high reliability. I'd like to first talk about our power delivery system, kind of give you a perspective of the system that serves these customers. In the 23 Southeast counties, we have about 2,300 miles of transmission lines. There are 16,000 structures that support those lines. And then on the distribution side, we have 5,500 miles of distribution lines overhead and another 700 miles that are buried in the ground, and over 160,000 poles that support that network. There are many thousands of transformers, reclosers, and other devices. And ultimately, we have about 150 substations that ties that network together. I know that's a lot of numbers and equipment, but we recognize the importance of both reliability, that's keeping the lights on, and resiliency, the ability to withstand and rapidly recover from a major event. When it comes to serving our customers, and we work every day to improve how we serve them. We also operate in an area that is prone to hurricanes and tornadoes. As Jeremy mentioned, Mississippi is like the new tornado alley. Severe thunderstorms, high density lightning, all of these challenges are there to serve our customers and keep the high reliability. But we're proud to be an industry leader in reliability and resiliency. On our system alone in 2025, the average customer experienced less than 49 minutes of power outages, 49 minutes, less than one outage on our distribution system in 2025. That is best in class. These results come from disciplined execution and intentional investment. We've also strengthened the grid through a deliberate approach to storm hardening. We have on our distribution system what we call our concrete pole initiative. We're replacing wood poles with concrete poles. We've replaced over 700 to date, and we have plans to replace up to 7,000 over the next 15 years. Along with that, we're elevating critical substations, and the equipment are in hardened facilities. And we're taking other approaches like our transmission line hardening effort, where along the coast, we have 81 contiguous miles of 115 kV transmission system that we're replacing wood poles with concrete and steel. We have a plan to complete that within the next 10 years, and we're well underway. Stronger infrastructure ultimately means fewer failures and faster restoration. And it's helped to reduce our customer outage minutes by 26% since 2020. At the same time, we're leaning into innovation in very practical ways. Not just ideas, but we're providing tools to help our employees serve our customers better. One that we're especially proud of is our self-healing networks. Today, we have about 97% of our customers within a self-healing network. What that means is when there is a problem that causes an outage, say for instance, lightning strikes a line and burns the wire to the ground, our system automatically detects that issue and switches the system around, isolates the trouble to the least impact that you could have. So many customers are restored just like that in moments, and we've reduced the number of customers that are impacted. We still have problem to fix, wire to pick up, a pole to repair, but you have limited the number of customers impacted, and ultimately you've improved reliability. We're talking about AI today and how we're preparing for it here in Mississippi. I can tell you at Mississippi Power, we're using it every day to gain efficiencies in how we serve our customers. We use AI-powered tools and cloud-based data analytics to give us real-time system performance, outage trends, and customer experience. This helps us serve our customer better. We can pinpoint where to invest before small issues become big problems. On the operations side of our business, we have a predictive storm modeling tool where we actually take a 5-day forecast, weather forecast, and we marry it to past outage performance on our system. And we can predict how many outages we'll have each day over that next 5 days and how many customers will be impacted. This has been a game changer for us. You think of hurricanes where you plan, you make sure you have the right resources, a number of resources. We're using this every day, every week. And you think about the fronts that come through Mississippi in the fall and the spring. This has really helped us be better prepared and not be surprised when there's an event, a weather event that impacts reliability. At the end of the day, this technology is about enabling our teammates and our customers. We want our teams to have the tools to do their jobs and more safely respond more effectively. And we want our customers to be fully engaged throughout the process. Reliability is a sustained commitment. It's not something you can just pick up every now and then. You have to be intentional about it every year. And if you do it right, invest with discipline and use innovation to stay ahead, you will improve reliability. We aren't just a power company in the communities we serve. Our employees are citizens where they serve. Each year, hundreds of employees volunteer thousands of hours and give out hundreds of thousands of dollars to local charities in Southeast Mississippi. In 2025, our foundation gave out $2.5 million across our territory and across the state. We donated to the Mississippi Cyber and Security Center that's now being built at Keesler Air Force Base, the Ole Miss Patterson School of Accountancy, and Extra Table Feeds, United Way, and other programs that are helping Southeast Mississippi. We're a company that's grounded in service and purpose. For more than a century, our company has played a central role in economic development in the state and job creation. In fact, we're the oldest organization in the state dedicated to that work. Our area's strategic advantages are undeniable: deep water ports, strong logistics, exceptional workforce training, and collaborative local and regional leadership. These strengths helped us be recognized by Site Selection Magazine last year as a top utility for economic development. Our Economic Development Department serves as a regional partner and strategic partner to the communities in the area, the industry leaders, state agencies, working to strengthen the competitive position and drive long-term economic growth. We support the state's broader efforts to have project-ready sites and buildings, advance business recruitment activities, strengthen workforce development programs, and structure competitive incentive strategies. Through proactive engagement, we help attract new investment, retain the businesses we have, and accelerate commercial and industrial development. These are some of the main reasons why we were able to successfully recruit Compass data centers to Lauderdale County. I look forward to discussing with you our plans to serve Compass and how we're protecting our current customer base from absorbing any of those costs. Let me say that last part again. Compass is paying the full cost of the infrastructure dedicated to serve them. That means stronger investment in our system, more predictable cost, and added protection to the customers we currently serve every day. As we look to the future, we are focused on delivering value for the next 100 years. Customers deserve and expect value every single day, not just in the electricity we provide, but in how quickly we respond and how we solve problems before they ever reach their businesses or homes. We approach that work in partnership with our Public Service Commission. We've built a strong, constructive relationship rooted in transparency. And when you look at the work of our people, whether it be in our power plants, on our power lines, or serving in our communities, we see a team that shows up every day in Mississippi to help Mississippi every single day. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your opening comments. I want to start with Mr. Vanderloo. Currently, the public record contains two very different pictures. First is the one that you presented today, which is your projections of more than 2 billion savings over 20 years. The other side of that coin is an estimate that's been commissioned by community and environmental groups of about $10.60 per month in cost to date. So those measure different things over different periods. What data can Entergy place on the public record so that Mississippians can evaluate both?
Well, I think the primary data I can put on the public record is acknowledging what Earth Justice did in its report, that it's basing its numbers on incomplete information. And the numbers that I've presented are based on the complete information. And they acknowledge that, rightly so, they don't have access to all of the information that's commercially sensitive to Amazon Web Services, just like I don't know what anyone else in this room pays for electricity. That's not on the public record. We don't disclose what Nissan pays for electricity. If they want to do that, that's their choice. It's their information. The two biggest problems with that analysis of $10.60 is one, it assumes that all of the infrastructure dollars that are going through that mechanism are attributable to AWS when they are not. As I mentioned to you, we need to build new generation to serve existing customers. And what we were able to do with Section 22 and the way it was written, instead of building two small units, one for existing customers and one for AWS, we built one large unit that is much more economical and saves both entities, our existing customers and AWS, money from having to build their own standalone units. Our existing customers pay for their share of that through this mechanism. AWS pays for its share of it through that mechanism. The second piece that's missing from their analysis, and they acknowledge it in multiple times in their report, is they don't know how much revenue AWS is paying. And when you net that revenue against the cost that is being incurred to serve AWS, the revenue exceeds the current cost today. And as I mentioned, it's not by a very large margin, but as that revenue continues to increase as AWS ramps, that margin is going to increase up to that $30 a month total. And as I mentioned before, I can't convince people who haven't seen the information, but the people who are protecting customers, our Public Service Commission and our public utility staff, they have access to all of that information, and they will continue to have access to that information.
Thank you.
Is it safe for me to tell my constituents to take a copy, to make a copy of their electricity bill today, and then next year compare it, and then the next year compare it? I mean, $20 to $30 within, you said up to 2030. Is that what you said? Was it 2030?
That's right. That's right.
Can you provide your projections of electrical rates with and without that with and without the data centers over the next 10 years?
I don't have it through 10 years. You know, we do financial forecast through a 5-year period.
Okay.
And as I mentioned before, I didn't want to go detail before, but I can tell you, you know, we took our capital plan that we publicly disclose as a investor-owned utility through the SEC, and we have to provide that capital plan. So we have it, you know, that we've done it. In 2023, we had a 5-year capital plan that looked out. We had no project from AWS. We have said multiple times in public SEC disclosures, we don't put infrastructure in our capital plan until we have a signed agreement with these data center customers. So there were no projects in 2023 that were in anticipation of a data center, because that's not how we do our capital planning. So we took that 2023 plan, we laid it out over the 5-year period. We then took the 2025 plan, which now had AWS infrastructure in it. We compared all of the infrastructure costs to the revenue that we would be collecting. As I mentioned, cost divided by the volume of revenue gives you that rate. And that produced, I go back to, I don't know if you can pull up the chart or not, but
Yeah, I was going to say, can we pull that back up?
Yeah.
That one slide is, I think, very informative, Mr. Vanderloo. Haley Fasackler uses it in his
Yeah.
presentations as well. It shows the trajectory of rates with and without the project. That one right there, yep.
Just to orient you, the red line is the U.S. national average price per residential customer. And this is call coming from USEIA data. And then that sort of orangey yellow line is our actual cost from 2012 going up through 2023. And as I mentioned, you can see starting in 2020, post-COVID, you start to see a real increase in that rate as costs start to really go up. And then where the blue line comes, that's based on the 2023 forecast, the infrastructure we would have built to serve customers, which again includes new power plants that were needed to replace the existing, the retiring power plants. And we have a lower level of sales volume because we have no new growth. And that's the blue line. And you can see it pretty closely tracks where the national average is going, because you can see a lot of investor-owned utilities who disclose their capital plans are showing you that they've got a lot of capital commitments as well. And so that's going to be putting pressure on their rates as well. And then the yellow line starting in 2024 and 2025, you can see where that's the projection based on our 2025 capital plan. And it shows the higher level of sales coming in from AWS. And so you can see that it's 2024 and 2025 is not much of a change because AWS is not even really ramping during that time period. But once AWS data centers start to come online and they start to ramp, that's where you start to see that real separation between the blue line and the orange line. And like I said, I didn't put dollar numbers on here because there are things we can't control in these forecasts, like the price of fuel. And I don't know if fuel is going to be higher or lower in the future. And if I could tell you that with certainty, I'd be making a lot more money than I make today because I'd be the only person who could tell you that with certainty. So we pay a lot of firms a lot of money to forecast for us what natural gas prices are going to be in the future because there's a lot of uncertainty in it. So we don't know what natural gas prices are going to do in the future. We just had a major ice storm that hit Mississippi this year that drove up $200 million of costs that we had not put in our forecasted plan. That ice storm hit whether AWS is a customer or is not a customer. And those are costs we have to recover, whether AWS is a customer or not a customer. But because AWS is a customer, other customers are going to pay less for that storm restoration than they otherwise would. And that's why there's no numbers on this chart, because there are things that could drive it up. And I don't want people to focus on, well, you told me residential rates were going to be X amount in 2030, because I'm not telling you that. But I'm telling you under either scenario, if natural gas prices are higher or natural gas prices are lower, that differential is still going to be roughly 16%.
That's just the two things that I hear from my constituents when I'm in the grocery store is blackouts and rate increases. Those are the two fears. And then will we be able to, will there be a water shortage? So those are the three things that I feel like that I get the most questions from data center issues.
And I'll be glad to address the power adequacy because one of the roles of my team here at Entergy is to look out into the future and forecast what our long-term power needs are. We do that through a process called integrated resource planning. We file those plans with the commission every 3 years. And that's where, going back to 2018, we have showed that we have aging generation that needs to be retired. And beginning in this 2030 timeframe, we were going to need new generation to come online. And so there's a very long record of that being documented at the Public Service Commission going back, like I said, almost a decade now. And so part of that process is it's looking out and saying, okay, what are the technologies available to reliably and affordably serve customers, whether it's advanced nuclear, which is not affordable today, or things like natural gas, existing nuclear uprates, wind, solar, batteries, all of these different technologies. We don't really have any hydropower in Mississippi, but we would evaluate that if it were available. And so we look at what those resources are, what's economically feasible, and then we start to plan around that. And today we're seeing that the time frame to build a new combined cycle gas turbine plant is roughly 5 years from start to finish. And a lot of that means you have to plan forward ahead if you can even find the turbines to build that, which we have arrangements in place to make sure that we have access to that equipment. But that's all part of this formal planning process. And so when a customer like AWS comes to us or Aveo comes to us and said, I need power by this date, we look at our resource plan, we look at the resources available, and we look at also what do we think our organic growth is going to be, because I don't want, a supermarket chain not to be able to expand organically into a community because I've overcommitted to some large customer. So we look at all of those factors in determining what is a reasonable load ramp for this large customer. And a lot of times we have customers come to us and say, I want to start power next week at this ridiculous size. And we have to tell them no. And we say, this is what we can do with you in a way that protects reliability for all of our existing customers. And so that's the same way we approached AWS. And we have load ramps in place with them. They are slowly building out their facilities and ramping up their need for electricity in a way that's not going to threaten the reliability of the power grid.
Mr. Schruff, is Mississippi Power making additional investments to accommodate the additional power demand from the Compass facility, which I believe is in your service area? And how do you see that affecting ratepayers in the future?
We're certainly building out our transmission grid there in the Meridian area to serve Compass. Let me describe it to you. We are rebuilding about 19 miles of existing 230 kV network. That's That's new structures, that's bigger, new wire. And we're also building 26 miles of new 230 kV lines. That's brand new lines to serve the Compass facility. There are additional enhancements to our substations in the area, and we're building a large substation there at the Compass site. All of this is really bolstering the grid for the Meridian area. When you think about what it can do for you, new structures, concrete or steel, big, stronger wire. And when you think about the storms we see in Mississippi that come through, it's going to be more resilient. And in the end, you have better reliability to the customers in that area. So it improves the reliability. It provides on operational side flexibility to better serve those customers with these newer lines and new paths for transmission. And one thing that's important about high reliability is it supports economic development. If you didn't have good reliability, a new industrial site does not want to come to that area. And so with us enhancing the grid there in Meridian area, it's bolstering reliability. You know, one thing we think about with growth like this, it's big. This is going to be our largest customer. We've had the Chevron refinery there on the Gulf Coast for 50 years, and it's been by far our largest customer and one of the largest in Southern Company throughout that time. This is going to be much larger than that. But growth like this should benefit everyone. And that only happens when we deliver value the way customers feel it. That's high reliability, stable prices, and through a company they trust. Thank you.
Mr. Sheriff, a quick follow-up. You know, we talked about the economic development side, and in my opinion, you can't have the economic without the workforce development side. So, you know, given the current build out as it relates to the Compass data centers, what workforce needs is this or will this create in terms of line workers, transmission technicians, engineers, and how can or how are Mississippi community colleges and universities, you know, satisfying that need?
Well, you know, you think about the construction, there's all facets here. You know, I'm focused on the transmission network and the power grid and the substations. There are many technical jobs with that. I know your Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College has a line worker program. We have them throughout our community colleges in the state. They are producing linemen that we hire in electric cooperatives and Entergy and TVA. We all hire in the state. We need that. We need more of that. We're seeing, you know, a workforce that needs to be larger to meet this need. And we're seeing people age out through retirement. So the workforce is in need of more technical workers, whether it be line workers for an electric utility. But I would think, you know, the data center is going to have technical needs inside that building to run the servers and the computer and the power system that they have too. So partnering with community colleges for workforce development is really needed in our state and something we need to continue to bolster.
Thank you both for being here. Mr. Vanderloo, I have a question for you first. I think you mentioned outages, you know, being cut by 50%. Can you speak a little bit more about, you know, how you project that, what y'all would be doing to get to that goal? And then question for both of you, are y'all able to speak about, you know, any recent developments y'all have seen from a grid reliability standpoint, you know, protecting the security of the grid from, you know, bad actors, whether that be domestically or, you know, internationally, you know, what the companies are doing, you know, with this influx of data centers, what y'all do to protect grid reliability, you know, generally, not just with data centers, but, you know, for consumers, businesses across, you know, all industries, you know, from a national security standpoint, bad actors that, you know, will try to, you know, tamper with the system, shut down the system, all those kind of things.
Sorry, I got the data security. What was the first part of the question?
First part of the question was more about the outages being cut by 50%.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
thank you.
Just how you project that, what y'all will be doing to reach that goal.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So there's a number of things that we are doing differently under Superpower Mississippi. We are increasing the number of line workers that we have. We recognize that as you look at the system where it is today, we needed to hire more people. And so we are hiring more line workers at Entergy Mississippi. We're also taking a different approach to how we structure those. We're piloting what's called a super crew, where we put together a large crew of line workers who can go out and handle more complex projects. That's showing a lot of work. And we've also taken, again, using some AI and some forecasting methodologies to say, okay, where are we seeing the highest opportunities for improvement, the most outages on the system? And a lot of times, the way that work had been done in the past is you have a particular project that you're working on. You may go out to an area and you'll go hit that project and do the work that was assigned to you. And there may be some other low-hanging fruit there that's not on your work schedule, and so that doesn't get addressed. And so now we're taking a much more holistic view that says when you're in the area, you do any reliability improvements that need to be done in that area, and then you move to the next adjacent area and go into each one of those highest priority areas that you can to do as much work as you can. And so that's a new process that we've undertaken. From an AI perspective, we're using AI now to sort of monitor vegetation growth. The vast majority of the outages that we're experiencing today and have for the last 3 years have been vegetation related. And we have 18,000 miles of overhead distribution line. And we patrol that basically every 5 years to trim the vegetation off it. And we do that on a circuit basis. We go and plan that work. Well, it ends up that, not all vegetation grows at the same speed. And so if I can use AI to figure out where's the densest vegetation, where is it growing the fastest, maybe I need to cut those circuits every 3 years, and where vegetation is growing slower, I can wait 7 or 8 years till I have to go and approach that. And so that's one of the ways that we're using AI to sort of help us be more efficient, to target the areas that need it primarily the most, and then again, save money in areas that maybe don't need it as much. From a data security perspective, of course, we just like all utilities, we have a very robust cybersecurity defense in depth plan. We work very well as an industry to share best practices, share things that are going on. I'm sure you all are well aware of the Mythos issue and things like that. And so we've got a brand new, process we put in place to sort of make sure we're managing those risks that can result from new AI like that. And so, again, I could go in a lot of detail here, but just, we've briefed our Public Service Commission on what our cybersecurity plans are, and they're very well aware of them. And it's, our industry takes it very, very seriously.
Yeah, and I could add to that, and try to in a couple ways. One, first with data centers, we're fortunate here in Mississippi. We have the construct with the statutory setup there to structure individual contracts with these large loads like a data center. And part of that contract is not only ensuring our customers, other customers are not impacted by those costs to serve that customer, but it's also protecting our system. We have requirements defined in there that will ensure that the power quality for the grid is maintained. We have a team, we're part of Southern Company, and we have a team that is working with NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, that is currently right now developing regulations and reliability requirements for data centers and utilities. And we're very much part of that process, and we look forward to helping ensure that power quality for all our customers is maintained, not just for that new data center, but for everyone on the grid. You asked about, I think, other scenarios that we might be aware of in other parts of the business. As Jeremy mentioned, cybersecurity is a big deal. And I heard the commissioner earlier say we need more nerdy politicians. Well, we've got some nerdy folks at work that are focused on cybersecurity. And one of the things about it is you don't share too much, but know that we have technology groups involved protecting data on all our employees to ensure it doesn't get out of the company. But we also put devices in our substations to monitor the substations and be prepared to respond should something happen there. We have spare equipment. Should someone have a hostile intruder or something like that damage a substation, we have equipment staged and ready to deploy to get that system back up and going. Thank you.
No, we got to go. I got one more question for Mr. Vanderloos. So current capacity of Energy Mississippi is 3.5 gigawatts, something like that. Is that correct? Is that
That's right.
Yeah. And so you're adding, based on AWS, another 1.5, maybe a little bit more than that. Depends on how much more they build. Somewhere in that neighborhood?
Well, I'm just going to say, again, I'm not going to disclose the size of their load because that's their confidential information, but the 3 power plants that we are building, which again is only partially serving their new load, is a total of about 2,100 megawatts.
Okay. So increasing by almost 50%, essentially. The investments you're making now, current
Yes,
capacity.
that will be netted out by retirements
Un-
coming in 2030.
Understand.
Yes.
You probably can't share this with us, but you know what would be really helpful to kind of soothe these fears? I've run into the same things Representative Ford was talking about is, well, your top line revenue is public record. Your public company, Entergy Mississippi, is just under $2 billion. I think the total company's about a 12 top line, Entergy. Is what revenue you'll be deriving from AWS. I'm simply saying, well, if you're going to increase capacity by X% and you're increasing revenue by a similar or more percent, that means they're paying for it. In general, you could draw that conclusion. I realize you can't do that, but I tell you what concerns me. Is you look on that chart for from the period 2012 through 2020, if you look at the top line there, that represents the average rates across the country, not Entergy Mississippi, fairly flat. But then it kicks into gear even before data centers come online and it starts trending up and to the right. I think the bottom line, and Representative Ford, I think you'd probably agree with me here, is that basically says, hey, expect rates to keep going up. Even Entergy Mississippi's rates, as represented by the yellow line at the bottom, they're still going to keep trending upward, albeit at a slower rate and pace. I think that's the point of the Amazon investment. People are still going to see their power bills going up, and they're going to blame it on data centers. Now, I personally went back and looked at my 24 May bill and my 26 bill. I actually found that the price per kilowatt hour was less in 26 than it was in 24, maybe due to the fuel adjustment. This is kind of information I think, Representative Ford, you may or may not agree with me here. It would be very helpful to the public.
Yeah, and that little dip on the chart there you see in what, 22 or 23, that's fuel related.
Yeah,
And-
okay.
And that's why that dipped down like.
And I know that's unpredictable.
If I could just add one more thing to you, again, I know it's challenging when you can't go to your constituents with complete transparency, but you know, our Grand Gulf nuclear plant is regulated by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They have a full-time on-site inspector who has complete and total access to the power plant. That individual goes around and looks at everything that's happening in that power plant, and the public doesn't know anything about what that individual sees until that person sees a problem and then it's publicly disclosed. And the Public Service Commission has complete unfettered access to our books and records, to the AWS contract, and you won't hear a thing about it until they see a problem. But believe me, if they see a problem, you will hear about it.
So to wrap things up, same question again for both of you as we've seen in the prior panelist. In your opinion, what is the single most important action that this task force should recommend the legislature takes into consideration or refrains from taking into consideration in regards to data center development for this upcoming session?
I'll start. I would say that the scenario we have now with the constructs in place where we have oversight from the Public Service Commission, we're vertically integrated, state regulated, works well for Southeast Mississippi. We're positioned well to serve new data centers and new customers, and I think that's something we need to continue moving forward.
Yeah, and this is not a criticism of a particular company, but when a data center is off the grid or behind the grid, there's no opportunity for that data center to help lower rates for existing customers. And it's only when the data center like AWS and Aveo are connected to the grid that we can create a rate construct where they're paying more than their incremental cost of service, that we can help drive down rates for customers. And that's why this vertically integrated model works. I know exactly what the generation cost, the transmission cost, and the distribution cost is to serve every one of these customers. And I can calculate that cost into their rate and know that they're paying adequate amount. You can't do that if you don't control generation or if you don't control transmission. And so that's a value that we have here in Mississippi. On a what not to do perspective, you know, I have a bias toward action because I work in an industry where we can't just stop and think about things because the power grid never stops. And when I hear someone say that we just need to put a moratorium on data center development, that really concerns me, because we have shown that we can handle complex issues in the state of Mississippi, and we can handle them appropriately and in a way that benefits customers. And, you heard from, Executive Director Wells that, there's things outside of MDEQ's jurisdiction. We're building a power plant in Richland. I can't tell you, Ridgeland. I live in Ridgeland. I can't tell you how many times I've been in front of the Board of Aldermen on public hearings related to that power plant, where they have regulated the lighting, the noise, the traffic, all of those things that are outside of state jurisdiction. Communities know how to handle those issues, and they can do it right if they're allowed to do it. So that's just what feedback I have for you.
If I could add to something Jeremy said there, when you think vertically integrated, as Jeremy mentioned, you could see the generation, the transmission, distribution, the fuel costs, the whole gamut. So not only can you protect your customers' cost, but you also are ready to move fast. You speed to serve. And so Mississippi in the Southeast, it's vertically integrated and state regulated, is positioned well to move quickly, which is just what the data centers need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
The next panel can go ahead and come to the table, workforce development. Get some more water.
Okay, well, what do you want? The copies of the bills, I mean.
Yeah, we're starting to build these like.
Oh, good, yes, more specific, yes. Good.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome panelists from the Workforce Development Accelerate Mississippi. Before you present your opening remarks, please introduce yourself and your organization. After you've given your opening remarks, I will invite the task force to present their questions. Please speak into the microphone and you have to push the green button to begin with. Go ahead, Dr. Taylor.
Well, I have figured out the green button, so it's a go for now. So I'm Courtney Taylor, Executive Director of Accelerate Mississippi. We are the state's Office of Workforce Development. And I have with me Ms. Kari Thomas, who runs all things AI in our AWS project. She is here to answer your hard questions. I'll take the easy ones at the end of this. Kari has been a fun member of our team, and I'm looking forward to having her with me today. So to start, I just want to say thank y'all for inviting us here to have this conversation with you and talk about kind of what we see AI meaning for Mississippi. What I have to say may be a slightly different perspective today, because from what I understand, most of this conversation usually starts with technology or data centers or energy or regulations or risk, and maybe rightfully so, but those aren't areas that I engage with, thankfully. I think those conversations are important. But from where I sit, I think the most important question that we have to answer is actually a lot simpler. How do we prepare Mississippi to compete in an AI economy, which is something we have been deeply focused on? And then to expand on that, how do we prepare Mississippians for that? The way I say it is at age and program appropriate levels. And that's kind of our focus from a workforce perspective. I don't believe, based on what I have seen, that the AI race where state government is concerned is going to be won by the state with the most servers, even though I do think those are incredibly helpful to our economy. So I'm grateful to have them. I think it's going to be won by the states with the most AI capable workforce and humans across the board, top to bottom, at every level. I think whether we build 100 data centers or a single data center, whether you use ChatGPT now or 5 years from now, whether you're excited about artificial intelligence or skeptical about it, I don't think anything that we're talking about is really in the future, even though sometimes we use the word like, oh, it's coming. It's been here. It's been here. If we are just now thinking about it, we're behind the 8 ball. And I think it kind of blew up really fast. From what we're seeing, AI is becoming a deep part of just simply how work gets done, regardless of what tool you choose to use. And in fact, I think it's so ingrained that most people don't even know when they are using artificial intelligence. They only think about ChatGPT or Claude or one of those things, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think electricity transformed manufacturing a while back. Internet transformed communication. And I think artificial intelligence is just another layer of infrastructure that's going to influence every occupation in our economy. And that is how we approach it. Is the simple fact it's in manufacturing, it's in agriculture and healthcare and construction and education and government and finance and logistics. It's in everything. I think as we think about it, and what I would like to encourage is not simply as a technology issue, even though I know that is kind of the charge that you all have. I think we should look at treating it more broadly than we do normal tech. I don't want us to handcuff AI out of fear, which I think from what I have seen out of Mississippi, I'm really impressed that we haven't had that knee-jerk reaction that I see some other states doing, even in how we operate within our state entities. I do think at the end of the day, this is a competitiveness issue for Mississippi. I see AI, especially where we're talking about tools like ChatGPT, like the back-end artificial intelligence, as a way to improve our productivity as both a state workforce and as workforce within our state working in private entity. I don't think AI belongs to education or IT or economic development or workforce development. It literally belongs to all of us. And that is what I think has made it so difficult to get a handle on across the board. One of the challenges we have in IT programs when we talk about workforce training or career technical education is that IT is in everything. And so you can't set alone generally in a state like Mississippi and say, oh, here's the IT sector and it represents this 1,000 jobs, because you have IT workers in agriculture, in grocery stores, in everything. And so as we have approached AI, that is kind of how we have approached this, is that we know it's going to be ubiquitous. We know that every worker, every agency, every employer is eventually going to use AI in some way, shape, or form. Good news is we've been here before. We'll be here again. We've adapted to major shifts in technology through the years. We've modernized agriculture. We've embraced advanced manufacturing. We've stood up new training systems. We've learned how to partner with employers. We've learned how to respond to changing labor markets. Like, change is inevitable and change is constant. So I think our approach in this case, though, is a little bit different because, or excuse me, I think AI is a little bit different, but I don't think our approach should be ultimately, which simply is we should bring education, industry, government, and workforce together around a shared strategy. I'm going to share a little bit, I'm going to steal a little bit of Colin's thunder, Dr. Napier's thunder on some stuff that he has worked diligently with Kari and many others on that I'm proud to get to represent, even though it's not my work. But the State Workforce Investment Board created a subcommittee that we called the AI Workforce Readiness Council last year, I guess it was. And that brought together educators, universities, community colleges, K-12, industry, Amazon, NVIDIA, I don't even, everybody. As many people as we could get together in one place to ask the question is, what should every Mississippian know about AI? Not just the software developers, not just the engineers, every single Mississippian. So that effort ultimately produced what we call the Mississippi State AI Framework. And Dr. Napier led that work. And I'm really proud of his efforts there, because it wasn't written to regulate AI or recommend how we regulate AI or what curriculum we should produce, but simply to create a common vision for how we need to be preparing Mississippi for the AI-enabled future. And I have asked Dr. Napier to correct me if I get any of it wrong, so just so we're clear. But we know that technology is going to evolve faster than statutes and government. It already is. We're already behind when it comes to that. And at some level, we probably always will be, just because it is so fast. But the framework that the group established and the team established ultimately creates principles for how we move, how K-12 moves, and community colleges and universities, and how we work on specifically for our workforce. Everything else is outside of our scope. It's just workforce. But as we've worked through that, the team, I guess I should say the team, thought through it and said, how do we make something that very simply creates a framework, allows people to move? What we did not create was, like I said, a mandate, curriculum requirements. We didn't prescribe vendors. We didn't write legislation out of that particular group. It is literally just 5 simple things. The first is AI literacy and access for all. I think this is more critical than we could probably ever estimate. And Colin, you can correct me if you think differently, but the digital literacy gap is large in a large portion of our country, not just Mississippi. If they're not digitally literate, it's going to be really hard to be AI literate. So we're going to have to figure out how to help bring the masses up, I think probably a little bit faster than we're ready to in the moment as a state. I think AI literacy is not a specialized skill. It is a core, durable, basic skill that we have to bring in, just like work ethic and showing up on time. And you've got to be able to manage this technology. I don't think everybody's going to need to become a programmer or an engineer or whatever, but they do need to understand what AI is and what AI isn't. In fact, if I spend any amount of time on social media, I would say the average person has no idea what AI is or what it can and cannot do. So I appreciate the effort of the framework to say, ultimately is our humans need to be able to evaluate the outputs from AI, not just the inputs. I think there's a concept that all people are doing is typing stuff in and copying and pasting it out, which a lot of people are, but that's not everyone. I think as we're teaching people how to use AI, the framework recommends also that we teach them what it's not for. If we're successful, it's not good. The AI literacy effort's not going to be reserved for large employers or urban communities. It's going to reach rural schools, adult learners, incumbent workers, and small businesses. But that literally requires everyone to engage. The governor actually announced that framework for the group, and I'm really grateful for that. My concern, though, is that people aren't really engaging with it. And so that is something that we have to think about every day, and something we have to keep pushing, that there's a framework there, you need to embrace it, you need to go on. I think the second priority that I think deserves special attention is just simply ethics. It's taking responsibility, it's critical thinking. I personally see the AI cool factor as a Trojan horse for teaching critical thinking, logical reasoning, things like that. I don't think AI is going to decrease our need for those skills. It's going to heighten them. So I think there's a lot of work we can do there. I think the world thinks, and I saw a bunch of comments, never look at the comments when you post this stuff, I know better. But I saw a bunch of comments when that framework went out that, basically is like, oh, hey, we're just going to teach people to let AI think for them. And that just proves they didn't actually read anything that was in the press release. But we're recommending exactly the opposite of that, human in the loop, if you will. But we're recommending that people learn to question AI, to verify it, to recognize bias, to identify hallucinations, to understand privacy and security, and know when a human judgment call must be made over the technology. There are a lot of rote things that the AI can do for you, but not everything. Again, I think AI makes critical thinking more important now than it really ever has been. And just watching some of the fake things come out on social media will teach you that really quickly, is that people just aren't critically thinking about what they're seeing. I also think there's a really important sentence, Colin, and I may butcher it a little bit, that you guys got into there, but basically the goal of the framework and what we're teaching is not to replace human judgment, but to amplify it. And I think that's really critical. I think we have an opportunity for our workforce to be more productive using this tool as they've used any other tool, from advanced manufacturing in robots and things like that, things that we're using in agriculture today. AI is just another tool. I think it can make teachers more effective. It can help nurses spend more time with patients instead of paperwork. I think it can help manufacturers identify quality issues earlier. It can help automate things that we should automate because humans don't want to do this work anymore. And I think it can make people better at what they already do, but it should never replace accountability. And so that's the kind of the way we're trying to approach it from a workforce perspective. This is a philosophy kind of I have with public policy in general. We need thoughtful policy. Privacy matters. Cybersecurity matters. Transparency matters. All those things still matter. Consumer protection matters. Those are all things, obviously, that I think you and the legislature have to think through. They are legitimate responsibilities of government, but I think we need to think about, kind of this technology in the same way. I don't think, as we've worked through this, what we're trying not to do is kind of control the innovation. We're trying to enable innovation, and we believe in that. I believe in that. Instead of protecting data, you protect the source of the data so that we can use data better without revealing the source or PII and things like that. I think we have a responsibility to teach our workforce how to use technology responsibly, and that's what all of this kind of comes back into. I don't think good governance is just saying no, it's creating the conditions for us to say yes. So how do we say yes in government to using these tools? And as you know, it's a challenge to get it all right there. So I think I applaud our lack of a knee-jerk reaction, at least from what I have seen in Mississippi, to just say, oh, we're not doing this, because I work with some other states that they've just said no to everything. So I appreciate that we're not doing that. I think as we talk about the framework, I think it's going to outlast and it'll manage through shifts and things like that. And as Colin called it, I think you did call it a living document. I'm not making that up, but continually updating it, seeing where the technology is going and where the guardrails need to come in, because we know that they'll need to come in. It doesn't ignore risk. And so if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you do. And one thing that I did appreciate about the framework is that it very simply identifies specific examples and situations which people are often lacking on, where human review should be in place. Hiring decisions, firing decisions. Don't outsource that. Employment actions in general, financial decisions, health and safety, legal matters, sensitive personal information. These are things that we often take for granted that kids may not be learning from any other source. If they're just freewheeling on the internet all day, they may not get this advice. So the more we can bake that into all of our programs, one thing that we have continually asked is that we not create more degrees for AI. Those may have a place, but what our office is talking about, what we're pushing for is that we layer AI into everything. I don't need CTE classes for AI. I need AI in every English class, math class. You know, how do you use those tools? How do you use them well? I think as we look beyond private industry, I think government has a really cool opportunity. If you think about an individual who loses a job today, they really do have to navigate multiple agencies. There's this eligibility and that eligibility and all these different things, multiple eligibility systems. I do think AI can help us organize government around the people instead of around the programs. I don't see the government changing, especially at the federal level, anytime soon, where we're just going to stop having all these programs. There are going to be 13 different entities with, 55 different programs. So I think it's going to be incumbent on us to figure out how to make all that stuff blend together for the individual's sake, specifically to get them back to work as fast as possible or to get them to work on the front end. So I think AI, and I hope AI can help us incorporate unemployment services better, help people find training programs better, find childcare assistance, career coaching. I think there's a lot of things we can do where people are used to just texting on their phone now. They don't want to go see a person. So we're working on those sorts of things and trying to figure through that. The goal is not to replace public servants, but to allow public servants to spend more time helping people instead of managing paperwork. As an entity that manages a good deal of state and some federal money, there's a lot of paperwork involved. So we're working through how do we automate what we can? How do we get it more digital so that we're not just spending our time with paperwork? So, and that goes down the pipe. I do think it's an exciting opportunity. I think we are uniquely positioned. We're not starting from scratch. We are ahead of the game. I think in AI, it was interesting to listen to the utility companies talk about it. We already know how to align with education and employers, and we work with them every day. We work with NVIDIA, we work with Amazon, and those we're really specifically working with kind of the end users in those cases. We know organizations like CSpire who are leading the way in kind of responsible uses for AI, and they're working with us and helping us understand how they're utilizing AI in their organization. We've already invested in AI literacy, some through the MyTap program that MDA put out last year. Y'all may remember that went out to universities. We've brought education, industry, workforce, everybody together. And I think that is something that Mississippi does better than anybody, is just get everybody in the same room and talk about it. Sometimes we may disagree, we may argue about it, but we'll do it in the same room and probably go have like dinner afterwards or something, because it's just kind of how it is. And I think there's a lot of power in that, and a lot of power that we often underestimate just to have everybody together. As we've navigated this, we're working with our regional training providers, our workforce areas, nonprofits, community colleges, all of those people to think through how do we drive these training programs. Kari, who has been just absolutely instrumental in this work, she works directly with Amazon, with Colin. Anything that comes through that's about AI is going to go to both of them. And they have been driving all of that work with the data centers. And so I'm really proud of that. I think when we talk about data centers and the workforce, it often comes back into the 2,000 jobs or whatever number we talk about publicly. What we often miss is the infrastructure, the information infrastructure, as Amazon termed it early on, and we borrowed that term. The information infrastructure, which is construction, fiber optics, the line worker conversation we were having earlier. Those are absolutely critical and voluminous right now. The challenge is it is hard to upskill a workforce fast enough to be able to go to work building out the data centers. We are working on that. We have also been really fortunate to have kind of a critical mass of this across Mississippi. So we're working with Mississippi Delta on a project I'll talk about in a second, but Meridian Community College and Hines Community College are working right now on a data center operations program. Those are high-level jobs. Those are highly technical jobs. So we're really proud of that effort. We know that we are working to develop these things, and at the same time to create better partnerships to make this stuff happen. So as I talk, we've got Hines, Holmes, Build Mississippi, South Delta Planning and Development District, Central Mississippi Planning and Development District. They've partnered with an organization called the Industrial Company. They're working with Entergy to build out the Entergy plants, I guess. And they are working right now to put construction workers to work. And I think it was an interesting data point we got this week, so I wanted to share those. Not every program is like this, so don't let me make y'all think that. But this particular program is entry-level construction. So we're talking about taking individuals who traditionally are from some pretty challenging backgrounds, either unemployed or just really, really desperately underemployed. We paid them a stipend to come to a training program. The company designed every bit of this, and the training did not last a single hour longer than the company asked for. But the program itself had a 100% completion rate, a 95% certification rate, and 91% of the enrollees were offered a job above the $20 an hour living wage that we focus on. Now we're only talking right now about 54 people, but to those 54 people, those jobs are making a massive difference in their family. And so that's how we approach it is do the dozens to get to the thousands. We have acknowledged, us and the SWIB board, that we need an additional 19,000 workers trained in priority occupations. That's well beyond AI and this, but it is construction, it is advanced manufacturing, it is healthcare. We need those workers trained because that is the demand over and above what we can already produce as a state. So that takes into all the production that we're already doing, and we're saying we need that many more. I do think, by and large, the system has underestimated the impact of all of this economic development and what it's happening. It is coming, and it's coming slow, but when it hits, it's going to hit hard. And that's what we're trying to hedge against right now. As we're working through programs like this, it is important not just to put out numbers, but to make sure it's having an impact. And for that, the 91% of enrollees who were offered a job, 88% today are still working for the company, which equates to 80% of the entire enrollment of the class, because you lose people in these workforce classes. Usually you lose about 30 or 40% of them. So keeping that many of them has been really important. But having 80% of the people still working in the Mississippi heat on a construction site doing legitimate manual labor, that tells me people want to work. So while this isn't the sexy part of AI and technology, it is an absolutely critical part, and a part that our workforce, we have to continue doing more for that. And we are. But we are only doing it where we have companies at the table. And that has been the hardest thing, I think, for most of the system to accept when we say sometimes the answer is that you do nothing. Because if a company isn't hiring people from these training programs, we shouldn't be producing them. Our responsibility is not to produce people to just hope they get a job. Our responsibility is to produce people to fill a gap. That's got to work a lot further back down into the system, and it's got to work fast. K-12 is going to have to do more. Community colleges are going to have to do more. The quality and the depth of what kids understand has got to increase so that they are ready to go to work in these jobs and ready to work with AI, ultimately at the end of the day. I think, as I talk a lot about construction, I think it's really important to understand that is a big need for the information infrastructure to really get rooted and get it going. And so I was excited to hear Entergy's comments about line workers. I'll share some data about that in a minute. But as we have looked at electrical careers, mechanical, HVAC, industrial maintenance, heavy equipment operators. I mean, you name it, there is a lot of opportunity. But starting the day Amazon announced meant we were already 2 years behind. We were already moving on some things, but it wasn't enough and it wasn't fast enough. So there's still work to be done. We have trained thousands working in partnership with Amazon in our community colleges, Build Mississippi, and some of these other local workforce development areas. We have thousands more to train every year than we're currently training. I think as I think through how do I summarize this, I think the reality is, for us at least, the real opportunity is when people, or Mississippians, I should say, have the skill to build, operate, and maintain not only the data centers, but the infrastructure that we have to accommodate those data centers. Like I said, we've estimated a need for about 19,000, what we call priority occupation people trained, and that's by 2035. I will say that for this particular sector, we've invested through the funds that the legislature has appropriated to us about $30 million And in just one particular example is we've increased the training capacity and line worker programs from 156 per year statewide to 263. As the demand signal gets more sincere, then that number can go up, but we're not just blindly increasing them because we don't want people to come out and not have jobs from these programs. So, I think I think the thing I would offer is I think, as you think through, how do we regulate it? How do we put the guardrails on it? How do we do all of these things? I think there's a bigger goal, at least where the workforce is considered. And in this case, workforce really just means every human in Mississippi. Is how do we become the state that helps people use it responsibly? And everybody be able to use it. So, I personally, and it's very self-serving, but I want to be the state that is known for preparing workers, for equipping educators and supporting employers. And I think if we get all of that right while we're encouraging innovation, I think the two can work really symbiotically. I think, our people are obviously really, really critical in this. And so the artificial intelligence is going to continue to evolve. But people like Kari and Colin have to be given the charge and the flexibility to go figure out what's coming next and to try to stay, if not in with it, at least as close behind it as we can get, so that our people are ready. So I appreciate the opportunity to chat, and I'd love to answer whatever questions you have, and continue the conversation.
I'll start. I spend way too much time on social media. During the commencement speeches that I saw, several of them on social media, I noticed that if a speaker mentioned AI, the entire audience seemed to boo. And it made me just real concerned about the seniors in college that are graduating without AI education. Tell me what we can do and what are we doing in Mississippi to fill that gap? Maybe I'm not even as concerned about K through 12 as I am about our four-year colleges.
Absolutely. One thing I will offer as I start is we're not using a bottle of water as a unit of measurement, which seems to be really popular on the social media sites, and I'm not really sure when that started. It's kind of annoying. I saw your bottle of water there and it reminded me of something I see. It's like, it's not like a cup, or what is that? So, I think what we are hoping right now, what we have funded right now, is incorporating AI education into the training programs. It's not fast enough. So if they graduated in May, the reality is if they didn't get it while they were in an existing class or in a program that maybe had an instructor that was interested in it, they may not have gotten it. I think that's where it becomes, wherever people can get access to the education as cheaply as possible is probably going to be important. I think employers are still not embracing it across the board the way we need to. And so that's going to be their next likely place that they can get education and training from it, or about it, I guess I would say, would be from their employer. So I think for us, it should be equipping employers with the basics that they need to understand and in learning from them. Because we have some employers, like I said, C-Spire has been really helpful in talking to us about how they're using it so that we can try to think through that. But it's not going to be a standalone training program about AI. It will likely be something that is infused into existing either onboarding or training. And then I think it is incumbent upon individuals to figure it out themselves. At some level, like we can do a lot, but we can't do everything. So I do think there's a component, and maybe it's an education component to the public that, think for yourself, use this information. Here are some basic tools. And maybe that's where we go with that. I know the Department of Labor has put out a free AI training program, and I'll leave it to y'all to tell me if that's something that we should encourage. But I think there are tools out there. I know that Maine has put many tools out there. At some point, we can lead the horses to water, but they've got to drink.
So first off, thank you, Dr. Taylor. Appreciate your commentary and your kudos of the work we did in putting together that statewide framework. So I'm going to echo what you already mentioned and encourage anyone listening, watching now, or in the future to please read it. And we can tell when you do not read it. I unfortunately read read the social media comments and saw the majority who did not.
We're
They just
both
read-
rookies, aren't we, Colin?
just read the headline. So one of the things I wanted to ask about is Workforce Pell. And to my understanding, that opened July 1. Is that correct?
It did.
So how can or will Workforce Pell change how quickly Mississippians can earn credentials as it relates to data centers, whether that's electrical, fiber, construction, anything within the environment?
I am so glad you asked. So a couple of things I want to make sure I get straight here is the application window for education entities opened on July 1. We have no approved Workforce Pell programs in the state of Mississippi right now. We were one of only 9 states with an approved application process. Like there are only 9 states that you can even apply as an entity to get approved for Workforce Pell. For everybody's purpose, Workforce Pell is Pell grants that fund education traditionally that are now being able to be used for short-term classes, meaning shorter than 15 weeks, 14 weeks, and 6 days. I think the biggest opportunity from what I've seen, and I want to make sure everybody knows, we fund through our office, through the Workforce Enhancement Training Funds and Mississippi Works Funds, a ton of short-term training programs at community colleges across the state. People don't understand them. They sit outside of the normal infrastructure for education. And so this is something we've been thinking through. How do we use Workforce Pell? Not only for Workforce Pell eligible programs, which will be a small number of programs. So the federal government through the One Big Beautiful Bill, there are legitimate things we have to do. It has to have a 70% working rate in field. That there are a lot of pretty steep regulatory type things. So not everything will work for Workforce Pell, but we do have non-credit training programs, short-term training programs that we already fund. So I think the answer is it could eventually do a good bit. It's going to take us a couple of years to get there. Our colleges right now are working on standing up programs where we need to. Not everything is conducive to a short-term environment. Short-term in this case means less than, I think, 599 hours, contact hours. But I do think what I saw when that went live was a bunch of people who said, oh, wait, there's training, basically training that we don't have to get a degree for. I'm like, there has always been training that you don't have to get a degree for. We have an entire website dedicated to it. In some cases, it's mspathfinder.org. Like there's a place where you can go find this information, but because it sits outside of the normal process, people don't recognize it and they don't understand it. So I think Workforce Pell has multiple opportunities. One of them is to stand up high quality programs that are short-term in nature that solve very specific needs and get people to work quickly. The other one is very simply allows us to connect an existing infrastructure that people don't understand with one they do understand and do that better. So we're starting to have those conversations. I know that's more than you asked, but it is something that never let an opportunity in this capacity go to waste. And that's what we're trying to do is how can we work better with financial aid and our WIOA services with Mississippi Works and WET funds and those kinds of things and pull it all together. But I do think there's a lot of really cool opportunities. I do expect to see some colleges stand up some programs here pretty quickly. We did apply as a state. We had all 15 community colleges work together to apply for a grant through the federal government. So I'm hopeful that we get that, but we can't control that. So that has allowed us and kind of forced us to put together an infrastructure where we're all doing it together. So we're going to still work through that, whether we get the funding or not. But I think it's a good opportunity, but it remains to be seen what it actually does. And I think the quality of the programs that we put forth will dictate that. Did I answer what you were asking?
That and then some. So
Okay.
thank you. I got more questions unless other people, I don't want to.
I got one, but
All right, Gerard, go ahead.
yeah. So thanks for being here, Dr. Taylor. So as I recall from SB 2001, the bill related to, of course, the AWS project, the only grant dollars that were incorporated, I mean, just straight the states making an investment, not providing a loan as it did for infrastructure to the county, was in fact for workforce development, $41 million. And I think Amazon was going to pitch in either a match or something along those way and along that line, and was also going to provide training facilities, instructors, other assets and resources. All that to say, where are we? What's happening there?
So we have a training center live in Canton, an Amazon training center. They have bought one or two of the Betsy's, sorry, y'all don't know what Betsy's, I named it Betsy, but it's a mobile data center operations training program or training equipment that they have. They have two of those rolling, and that is part of what you're talking about, the 50-50 program that they have. $10 million of the 41 was reserved for what we call MyTap, the Mississippi AI Talent Accelerator Program. We pushed 9.1 million of that out the door late last year, I guess. That is out the door with mostly with universities doing some really unique things. The goal there was for universities to lean into what they're good at, not try to reinvent the wheel. So we've got law schools working on law-related things and state schools working on the programs that they already had. There are $6 million remaining to go out from our 16 million, is what I call our 16 million. That is for community colleges in K-12. And it's not doing any good. Thank you. I am allergic to everything. So something in this room has me going, but there's $16 million remaining, or $6 million remaining for K-12 and community colleges. We expect to push that out over the next couple of months. We're waiting on some answers right now. So that both of those, the MyTap and that money, which I think we're calling Constructing Futures, at least for the moment, that money is designed, September. Okay. That money is designed and was solely going back into education entities in Mississippi. So how is it going? It's going pretty well. They have leaned in really a lot. And I'd love for Kari, if you talk a little bit about the data center operations and the other programs that you're working with.
My button. So I'm Kari Thomas, and I am a workforce development manager with Accelerate Mississippi, and I work very closely with AWS. I've been working with this project for almost about a year and a half now. We knew that AWS had a need for a lot of people trained, and trying to figure out how to tackle that was our first hurdle to jump over. We realized that short-term training programs were needed. And so we've worked with AWS and the local community colleges in central Mississippi to develop short-term training programs. We also started Reconnect, and CMPDD started the first cohorts of Reconnect, and that is stipend training, and it's short-based training. So far, they have graduated 731 people from the program in the last year and a half. There's an 85% completion rate with that program. So they're doing well, and that's just in central Mississippi. There are other people who are also doing stipend training, short-term training. Entergy talked about electrical lineman classes. We have funded 25 colleges, 25 courses, some colleges on different campuses since 2024. And we put about $3.8 million into those projects. DCO is data center operations. DCEO is data center engineering operations. Those courses are going to start first in this area with Hines. Hines is working on that right now as we speak. Matter of fact, AWS will be in town this week going over the final touches for that, and they'll also be doing train the trainer for those courses. Data center operations focuses mainly on it focuses on keeping up with the servers and the IT side of the data centers. Data center engineering operations focuses on HVAC, plumbing, electrical. And so this short-term training, it takes 7 to 9 months of training, and they do it in about 4 to 5 months. The rest of the training is going to happen with AWS, and they'll be able to do on-the-job training with that.
Are there any certifications that are earned as part of this training? Thinking about the common RCDD certification for structured cabling.
I'm not sure about all the certifications. DCO and DCEO have its own Amazon certifications.
That's
that
probably
come with
Amazon
that.
search, right? Yeah, that's fine. But RCDD, as you know, is a widely recognized industry standard. It's huge and it's,
I'm not saying it's
there
not.
ain't enough of them, right, Craig? We don't have enough of them. It's a huge shortage.
Agreed, and I think it was a really great explanation.
Yeah, and the participation is very impressive too.
Inside of a data center, there's different skill sets, right? Sort of a technical skill sets, but different sorts of skills inside of a data center. But I do think that there are specific certifications like Gerard was talking about that I think would be, really, really critical, which you find, and you all have found, because, AWS, that's where it's coming from. And I think, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because that's where you're going to be going to work for. And that's when we want to be sure it's very specific to what it is that you're doing.
I would love some more, any of those kinds of things that you guys know about that maybe, because the attention is very much focused on a
Sure.
really niche thing right now. But as it gets more general, I'd love to have, make sure we're kind of working on that and giving people opportunities to go wherever they want to go. Love that. Thank you.
Yeah, usually, you got to travel and spend money to send people off. I feel like I pay for lots of kids' college education before it was all over with, but it's expensive. But if there's some way we could localize that, I think it'd be a huge asset, something to look into.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely look into it. And we have taken the approach of spending more, not necessarily spending more money, but spending more time and resources on higher quality things and less funding on the lower quality things. So if there are jobs attached to that,
Yeah.
we'll be here for it. So I wrote it down to make sure we go,
That's
make
awesome.
sure we're checking up on that. So, but longer, it's really trying to spend their money as fast as possible.
Sure.
And then we're putting the funds that we have also into the system to make sure we're kind of looking at it holistically in the regions that it benefits.
There was a recent announcement for Marshall County, 2,200 manufacturing jobs that what I would consider to be data center adjacent.
Yep.
My understanding is, manufacturing servers, power systems, liquid cooling for the data center energy here in Mississippi and beyond. How is or how will Accelerate Mississippi assist in preparing that pipeline? And what does that tell us about supply chain opportunity beyond the data centers themselves?
I think from what I have seen at least, and I'll let Executive Director Cork answer that specifically tomorrow, but I'll answer from what I have seen is Amazon has prioritized Mississippi companies for the supply chain. So you're looking at Modine, there's a couple of examples earlier, ABB, now this company, there are plenty more where that's to come from. And I think the supply chain reality, the fun part of it is when you have a state that is adept and accustomed to an industry, data centers are not something we were used to. However, manufacturing we got in spades. And so that project is really fun because it's manufacturing at the end of the day. So that project's going to move very fast, much faster than most of these types of projects. Usually you're looking at a 2 to 3 year build out before they start operations. And in this case, we're looking at a year. But again, we're just training people for manufacturing. We'd already been working in that region really heavily with the Amplify project. So we will upskill, reskill, and move people into those jobs, working with the company. And the company has already some familiarity with Mississippi and the region. So that one's probably going to go pretty quickly, and it doesn't have a choice but to go pretty quickly. And I think that is something I haven't talked about today, but one of the reputations that I have seen Mississippi get because of the AI and the Amazons of the world is that we move fast. And that's not something most people think of when they think of Mississippi. And I'm not just selling that. Like, you can talk to people outside of Mississippi, don't listen to me, but that's what we hear from people outside. So that project's going to move fast, but it is your typical advanced manufacturing assembly type thing. And so something that I think the region is comfortable with. And it was interesting, anyway, I won't say what I was going to say. It's interesting. Nobody had a problem with it until somebody said, oh, it's producing stuff for data centers. And then everybody started freaking out about it. It's a good opportunity for a lot of people in that region.
I just wanted to add, Dr. Napier, appreciate you bringing that up because it reminds that's some 2,000 permanent jobs that are a direct result of AWS's investment. In fact, what they specifically make are PDUs, power distribution units. it wouldn't surprise if most of their output goes to Amazon
Yep.
in Mississippi. I mean, because as you know, data centers like eat those things, right? So, and it's constant. You're
And the
constant-
company is a contract manufacturer. So
Right.
if that were to ever slack off, they would go find something else to build for. So it's a great situation. And we've got several examples of that around the state. So yeah, all doing some really cool tech thing that we haven't done a lot of. So I think it's great. It does require a higher skilled workforce continually. And that's what we're trying to bake into it. The system's got to respond faster though. That's
Higher skill, higher pay.
higher skill,
Yeah.
higher pay. It's great wages. We got to keep doing more of that.
So just to round us out here for the day, again, thank you, Dr. Taylor and Ms. Thomas, for your time. A million more questions we can always ask, but I'll end on the same question I've asked every other panel today. And both of you can answer it, or Dr. Taylor, if you just want to take it, that's fine. In your opinion, what is the single most important action that this task force should discuss in recommending that our legislature take or refrain from taking on data center development for upcoming sessions?
You have anything? Okay, I'll give Kari the opportunity. I think I would just urge, I don't have any specific actions, but I would just urge to quiet the noise, at least in the policy. Resist knee-jerk reactions. I think we know enough now to know kind of where it is and what it is and isn't doing. I actually was in a meeting with the likes of Microsoft and LinkedIn and OpenAI and some others, and it's the same thing I asked them to do is they need to spend more time educating the consumers, because right now it's the middle guys who are educating everybody, and all they're doing is selling their wares, and it's exhausting everybody. And so I think wherever y'all can get around the middle guys and directly to the tech companies and to the technology itself on what it needs to do, I think that would be really critical, and it would really help the workforce and the humans in general in Mississippi. I think everybody's just really confused. There's a lot of polarizing, and, you know, I joke about the bottle of water example, but that's the one I keep coming back to. And that's what I'm a country girl. I live in the, in the world. And so my world is agricultural type people. And that's what I started seeing is, oh, every search is a bottle of water. I'm like, I have drank a lot of bottles of water today. So not to make light of it, but it's just how it is. So I think quiet the noise every chance we get. Hear it, but also just focus on good policy and not policy that just responds to some pull. And good luck, because I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I'll let y'all do what you do.
Well, thank y'all for your time.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Madam Chair, if you want to close us out.
I appreciate everybody here, the task force, taking the time to educate ourselves and gather the facts. We want to be wise. We want the knowledge and wisdom and understanding. We want to make sure that we do not have knee-jerk reactions, but we listen to our constituents. I know I'm the only one sitting at the table that has constituents. And it is something that I take very, I want to honor their request and their hearts, their concerns. And you all being here today is helping me do that. So I thank each and every one of you. And I can't wait for tomorrow. And I honestly can't wait till this is over with, to be perfectly honest. But today's meetings are adjourned, and I will see all of you in the morning.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.